Okay, so I am recording and starting.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newburyport Historical Commission meeting of Thursday, the 10th of December, 2020. Yet another virtual meeting. Most of you are probably familiar. We have members present tonight, Mr. Christopher Fay, Mr. Peter McNamee, Mr. Joe Morgan, Ms. Patricia Pecknick, myself, William Richards, the chair. Ron Ziemba has resigned as of the 17th, and he is also absent tonight. So there is a vacancy on the board if anyone is interested. And we're looking for Mr. Carnwath.
He's in the attendees.
He is, okay.
Yes, now that I know how to see it, I can tell you.
Yeah, so Caitlin, do you know how to promote?
Yep, I'll promote him right now.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay, so just a couple of quick things to go over. The audio will be enabled for the commissioners, and as a rule, the public will be muted except during public hearing periods. Now, if we do open the meeting for public comment, and which is likely to happen, and you want to make a comment, use the facility of the Zoom controls to raise your hand so we know that you wish to do that, and we can unmute your mic. You will almost certainly also need to unmute it yourself locally. So we have to unmute you and you have to unmute yourself in order to be heard. If you're on a telephone, *9 raises a hand or lowers it, and *6 unmutes. Note to my fellow commissioners, if you either make a motion or second it, to state your name along with that so the note taker can appropriately record who's making and seconding motions. And that's I think and all the votes will be roll call votes for these Zoom meetings. So that's most of the preamble. I don't want to dwell on that too long because we're all getting pretty used to these things. So I'd like to move right along. Pardon me. The first item on the agenda is 265 Water Street. This is a demo permit application. They want to change the rear of that particular building. Let's see. I see Rachel Harris and Mark Griffin are here, and you have been unmuted. Who is going to be presenting?
I'll start, Mr. Chair. This is Mark Griffin.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Mark.
Okay. Again, Attorney Mark Griffin from the law firm of Finner and Nicholson, 30 Green Street, Newburyport, representing the petitioner, Walter Long. Mr. Long is the owner of the property located at 265 Water Street. As you can see from the filing with your commission, that he is seeking to renovate his home. This home is a single family home. It's located in the Agricultural Conservation Zoning District. It's also in the Demolition Control Overlay District. The home was built in or about 1710, according to the assessor's records. The property is contributing to the Newburyport Historic District. It does have a Form B associated with it. In the Form B, it lists the age as early 18th century. The Form B, this home is called the Mariner Goodwin House, and it is in Georgian style. So based on all of this, we submit to the commission that it is in fact historically significant. And so that we would request that the commission find it so. And it would also know that it would be preferably preserved. But we would respectfully request that the commission release it from demolition delay based on the presentation that we're going to make, and obviously we'll make our case in just a moment. I would also note that with respect to the Form B, the home does not look like it looked on the Form B. The change in the front is mainly the small outbuilding is removed on the right, and then in the rear, obviously you can't see that, but the rear has had significant modernization and dormers added. And the majority of all of the proposed work associated with this application is going to be to the rear of the home. So That being said, the petitioner proposes to remove that existing non-historic rear dormer and construct a full width shed dormer. This will raise the ridge height by about 5 inches. The mean roof height will be raised by approximately 1 foot. The roof line change is what brings the property under the jurisdiction of the Historical Commission and under the purview of the Demolition Delay Ordinance. As you can see from the zoning determination drafted by Jennifer Blanchet, we were sent here for that particular reason. I would also note that the proposed work will create an upward extension of a non-conforming rear setback.
Right.
This will require the petitioner to seek relief at the Zoning Board of Appeals by way of a special permit for non-conformities. There's also a Conservation Commission filing that's likely to need to be made. And so the petitioner, as you can see from what I believe Caitlin has shared on the screen, those are the elevation drawings. And if you wouldn't mind, please going to page A1, there'll be the photos. Thank you. So on page A1, you see the photos and it shows the existing home to be a salt box style home. It's located in the Joppa area bordering the Merrimack River. And the view that's, you see from heading east along Water Street, there's very little of the left side. And by left, I mean when you're facing the front of the house. So there's very little that you can see of the left side of the house when you're going easterly on Water Street, whether it be from the sidewalk or in a vehicle. That sort of side really is obscured by the adjacent property and also by some vegetation. And then you really can't see any of the rear of the property coming that way. The view on the right side of the house, again, as you're facing the property. So if you're heading west on Water Street, you can see the right side on the right side of the house, but very little of the rear of the house. You can see the sort of the profile of the existing dormer. And if you're traveling by a car, it's a brief view. There's a tree, right on the way, which obscures the dormer until you're right on it. When you're at the park on street level, if you're sort of walking and you're down in that area, then you can see the side of the home and the profile of the dormer in the rear much better. But again, really the only full view of the rear is from the water. And those photographs are also on page A1. And you can see that there's a deck and it's relatively modernized in that area. And so at this point, I think what I'm going to do is turn it over to Rachel Harris, the architect who has designed the proposal, and have her explain the project to you and how it's constructed. Thank you.
All right. Now, let me interrupt you briefly, Mr. Griffin. Normally, like I consider that part of the demo plan review, which reviews the demo plan and reconstruction plans and so on, which is normally done after a vote on whether it's historically significant and preferably preserved. I think we all agree that that vote is almost certain to fall that way, but I think we should, just to keep things neat and tidy, we should probably go ahead and take that step first, and then if, as expected, it is historically significant and preferably preserved, you can fully review your demo plan and proposal. Does that sound okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So as Mr. Griffin pointed out, there is it seems little doubt that it's a historically significant property. There's been, I just want to make sure everyone's clear on these votes on historically significant, preferably preserved or not. Whenever it's pretty unusual and rare for it to be historically significant and not perfectly preserved. That's usually happens in either a case where the the structure is so badly deteriorated it can't be saved, or it's been so heavily modified that it's not even recognizable as an antique anymore. So I don't think this falls into either of those categories. So I don't want to lead everyone too much, but and I don't think this is a particularly controversial case of that. But any of my fellow commissioners have any comment to make or like to make a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion that it's historically significant.
And this is Joe. I will second that.
All right, so it sounds like, all right, so we can do that first. I'll do a quick roll call. Now, Malcolm, I know you've been promoted to be the panel, so if you unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you. So we're voting on whether it's historically significant. Did you hear that, Malcolm? And
Yes.
Okay, was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, and myself is a yes. So, and is there a motion as to whether it's preferably preserved?
I'll make the motion that it's preferably preserved. Yes.
Second.
Okay, hang on a second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that it is perfectly preserved. All right, so I'll do the roll again. Mr. Carnwath? Malcolm? Okay, that's a yes. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
And the chair is yes as well. Okay, so it is historically significant and preferably preserved. So we move to the demolition plan review. So we'll first allow the applicant to present the demo plan and for what they want to do, and we'll also allow public comment at some point after that, and then deliberation. So as this, Ms. Harris, are you going to
Yes.
do the plans?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Caitlin, could you go to page A2, please? So initially, when I met with my client, Walter Long, his goal was to put a second floor deck on that existing dormer as you're looking at the rear on the right-hand side. And that, according to Jennifer Blanchet, is allowed as of right. But, and we were going to go with what is allowed under the dormer rules to have a dormer that was set in 3.5 feet on each side. But when it came to design the structure for the new dormer, we could not accommodate the a reasonable ceiling height with what's required by code in order to support that roof. So if we could zoom in on this sheet on the bottom left-hand side.
I don't think I have that zoom function.
Oh,
Sorry about
okay.
that. Can you see that better? You see that?
Yeah, I'll just try to. So the new ridge beam, which is this wide square beam, is 7 inches in height. The existing beam that's supporting the entire roof is only 4 inches by 3 inches, and it's not even situated like in a typical vertical position. It's like kind of on an angle. And that's completely unable to support the roof for a dormer. And if we were to set that at the height required, we would only have about 5'5" in ceiling height. Right now at the steepest point, we have about 6'1". And so the goal with this design was as much as possible to maintain the same look of the roof while gaining those few extra inches that we need to provide the structure, the insulation, and the head height in that room. So as you can see on A1, if we were to go back, let's see. Yes, from the water side photos, we already have a dormer on that in that attic level. And that ceiling height at the windows is only about 4'3". So it's extremely low up in that space. And so the goal with asking for this demolition is to allow reasonable ceiling height in that space and to structurally accommodate what is necessary. Let's see. Are there any questions?
Sorry, any questions for the applicant from the commission? No? Okay, I'm seeing people shaking heads and so on.
Are you completed your presentation, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay, did you want to add anything, Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I might. So you heard from Rachel Harris what the purpose of the project was and how it was to be constructed. And as she noted, the building code requirements, really, helped take this outside of the by right option, which would have been under section 5308E, which was the rule for exempt dormers, where they could have done this, without going to the commission for approval. Hope to not have to do that and make this a usable space. And the by right dormer would only give Mr. Long about 5'5" worth of ceiling height. So you have to be a fairly short person to be able to utilize that particular space in the rear of the house. So this upward extension cures that issue and allows Mr. Long to sort of get full use of the home, which we think is really something that's important, especially when it comes to historical homes. And we also think that the proposed extension and roofline change will not significantly change the form and shape of the building. As we went through the photos in A1, page A1, if we could go back to that now, please. And showed, what you can really see of the building as it exists now. And so really the majority of what you could see in the rear, anyway, with respect to the actual dormer itself, would be basically from the water side or maybe from the park. And the rendering that Rachel did, which shows up in the right-hand corner of page A1, proposed upper right-hand corner, says proposed street side from right rendering. No, it's still on page A1. And yeah, so you see a small profile of the dormer. And with the raising of the ridge height, it's a 5 inches worth of height change, which we don't believe is going to be noticeable by people passing by on Water Street. It won't particularly change the facade, the shape, and the view that people have of the building from that end. And so accordingly, we don't think that most of the proposed work is going to be visible from the street. It serves the ends of, keeping an historic building reusable and adaptive. And, that's one of the ways we save historic buildings is by allowing them to be altered at least somewhat so that people can live in them in perpetuity. And so for the foregoing reasons, we respectfully request that the commission approve the plan submitted and release the property from demo delay.
Mm-hmm.
And one last thing I would just add that my client Walter Long is here tonight logged on,
Okay.
and he may wish to speak. I don't know if that's the case, but he is there if the commission has any questions for him as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Griffin. I have two quick questions. How long has Mr. Long owned this property? About?
Ooh, let me check the assessor's card, which I have in front of me. So it looks like 2001.
Okay. Okay, so about 19 years then. And was there did you have any discussions with the building commissioner or anyone else about possible exemptions from building codes for antique structures like this? Because I know there's some consideration, for that. I'm not sure if it applies when you're, for example, I know you don't have to go in and upgrade everything in the house. For example, I'm not sure exactly how it would apply in this case, but I'm wondering if that was looked into.
I did not have that discussion, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if
No, go ahead.
So while we can potentially be exempt from certain building code items such as ceiling height, which actually we will already need because we're only going to have about 6-foot ceilings, which is under the 7-foot code requirement. We don't have any exemptions from the structural requirements. So when we add this dormer on, we have to meet the structural requirements of the code.
Okay. Okay, and while I'm going to ask the commission if they have any questions, but in the meantime, if there are people out in the attendees, members of the public who would like to speak, you can we can start queuing you up. Raise your hand, and then just we will briefly get to that point. But first, let me turn to my collaborators here on the commission. Does anyone have a question for the applicant?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question if I could.
It's Peter McNamee. Go ahead, Peter.
I understand the design intent around gaining those crucial extra inches up above. Certainly 5'3" or whatever it was is insufficient. So that I understand. I do sort of lament the fact that that dormer has that dead flat or effectively dead flat aspect to it. And as opposed to the older dormer, which does at least continue looking like a sloped roof a bit. But again, I understand the head height issues. Why is it that the dormer has to run right up to the extreme edge of the building on either side, as opposed to being inset, just to break that surface up and maintain the salt box aspect?
I can speak to that. So in order to raise this beam, if we look back at that on the A2 sheet on the bottom, this section. So the ridge beam itself is no longer centered underneath the ridge as in a typical building. And so we're actually taking advantage of the flatness of the roof so that we can keep the beam up even higher than we might otherwise be able to. I would prefer to see the dormer off the side walls as well. And Walter was open to that option. It's just like a kind of a structural conundrum that I have this beam that's very wide, and I was able to sort of disguise it in the very low slope roof. As soon as we need to fit it under that tight triangle of the roof, it has to drop back down, and we're back to that very low ceiling challenge.
I think Mr. McNamee was asking about the left to right dimensions, Ms. Harris. Like, why did it go all the way to both sides? Am I right, Peter?
Yes, and I think I followed what the architect is.
Yeah, and so that is what I'm speaking to. Like the
Yeah.
beam itself, if we were to end it short of, it still needs support all the way to the foundation, if it's this shaped beam. And so I need posts somewhere. There's no place to put posts. It's a very small house, and I can't disguise this massive beam without the aid of that sort of flat piece of roof. I wish I could zoom in on this section because you could see that it's actually the edge of the, so it's the beam in the center, that X in the middle of the roof where it switches from a steeper pitch to a flatter pitch.
Mhm.
The right-hand side of that beam is actually at what looks like the ridge
Right.
center,
The old ridge, yes.
instead of where you might more typically have that beam centered underneath the ridge. And so, yeah, it's just a problem of support and structure, and there's no way for me to disguise that beam.
Did you take this problem to a structural engineer to see if there was any way at all? It's
did.
pretty blatant, being
this-
right up hard against the end of the house.
This was designed by John O'Connell. Actually, I didn't design the structure. And we had various other conversations about things like potentially using a piece of steel. Even steel, we weren't going to get a section that was any shallower than 7 inches.
Right.
And even if it was narrower, we were never going to get close to that 4-inch by 3-inch existing ridge. And the other challenge that comes in with that is it almost doesn't matter if we can get a smaller section, because the roof rafters have to be at least 2 by 8s. Like, it's not like in 1710 when some of these pieces are like 1 1/4 inch by 1 1/4 inch. And so there's no material that has that structural capability. And we also have to insulate, and there's no insulation that is so thin.
All right. Visually, I find that disturbing. I don't know what my fellow commissioners think of it.
Yeah, I'm sure that we'll come back to that in the deliberation after public comment, Peter. Excuse me. Anything other questions from the commission? I do see a hand raised in the attendees, so we'll go to public comment. But let me first check with the other commissioners if you have any questions.
Yes, Chair Richards, this is
Yes.
Joe. I have a question
Okay.
for the architect. How do you get to this space? Is there a stair inside? I mean, I know your plans aren't complete, but I'm just curious.
Yes, there's an existing, very 1710 style, tight little staircase up to this floor.
Is that in the open below space?
Can we scroll over? I can't remember how I labeled.
Yeah, can you scroll to the left there, Caitlin? Yeah.
Yes, there's an existing staircase in that space where it says open to below.
Wow, that's like a ship's ladder probably, huh?
Yeah, it's all different shaped winders and very, very small.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you get to the attic, you're not really surprised by a 6-foot ceiling.
No, you're definitely not. In fact, I think the ceilings in the second floor are something like 6'6" or something like that. They're very low.
Yeah. We've seen those stairs. You've probably seen them too, Joe. They're not a straight flight. They typically take several turns to between the front door and the chimney masonry. They kind of do a little roundabout thing to get upstairs. Is that about what it looks like, Ms. Harris? Something
It
like
is,
that?
and actually the side on the left, the nook, it is
Right.
the space that the stairs actually lead to, and then the side where it says storage is just sort of an open doorway. The stairs don't lead up. You're kind of at about waist height, and you can sort of climb in there, but the stairs don't lead into that space.
All right.
Very good, that's very efficient. So thank you very much.
Okay, if nothing else, I think we can open the public comment portion. I do see a hand raised from Mr. Calderjohn. I think he's unmuted. So Mr. T, if you want to unmute yourself, you can make a comment.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Calderjohn, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. The trust strongly opposes this application. Newburyport has very few first period houses left, and even fewer salt box roof forms. The Secretary of Interior Standards, which helps to guide your decisions, is very clear. Changing of a historic roof form is not recommended. Installing a full shed roof dormer and projecting the roof height, even the requested 5 inches, would distort the roof form. It doesn't sound like much when you think of 5 inches, but when you add a full shed dormer, you totally alter the roof. No longer will you see the long, graceful slope of the roof. You will see the dormer on top as though it were a foreign object out of place. I think it is unfortunate that it has the existing dormer near the top of the roof. The requested change will make a bad change to the roof much worse. It does not even meet the minimal standards of the city's dormer ordinance. People love this building and look forward to seeing it while walking or driving by. The trust respectfully requests that you impose the demolition delay on this wonderful historic first period salt box. It is an icon along Newburyport's waterfront, and it would be a shame to see it change so significantly. Perhaps it is naive to think so, but it's my fervent hope that over time, the owner will reconsider this change. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted myself as I was talking away there. Thank you, Mr. Colder John. I see Stephanie Nikitish's hand is up. If you, but yeah, and you're unmuted if you want to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first comment is about how viewable and visible this building is. So the rear of it, which is greatly impacted by the previous modifications to the roof line and certainly by this, is viewable from the Merrimack River. The Merrimack River, like the rail trail, is a public way. So this building is being changed in a very publicly visible way. I agree with everything that Mr. Coulter-John said. I question the idea that in order to keep these old buildings livable or adaptable, that you have to make these changes which essentially ruin their form, which ruin the integrity that they have architecturally. People have lived in this building since 1710. There are people still who can live in smaller spaces. It seems like this change, which is dramatic, is only for a roof deck, which is certainly, as has been discussed many times by the commission, not historically appropriate. And I also, I am concerned anytime now, especially, that a building of this age is changed dramatically structurally. And so I have two hopes in addition to the one that you will simply impose the delay. And they are that you require a structural report which addresses how this will affect the building, all of it. And also that you yourselves go on a site review to look at this building and to understand what the structure is like now and how it looks right now and how this plan, which I think is very detrimental, will change it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Don't forget, okay, and your hand is down, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Going on, oh, I just saw one go up. See me get the full name, Holly and J-E-N, the last bit of the name, Janice. Holly Janice, you are unmuted if you want to make a comment.
Hi, this is actually the owner, Walter Long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was having problems with Zoom, so I'm using another computer. I can understand the opposition. There are two sides to this. The one thing I would like to ask about is the roof line versus the dormer, the shared dormer, because I can see that the change to the profile is not the best with the dormer so close to the side there. And, there could be issues with, I'm not sure what the answer is, certainly a smaller dormer perhaps, but if we were to come back and say, well, okay, how about this plan where it still has an increase in the roof height, but a different design as far as the dormer is concerned. What sort of change would that make? I'm interested in hearing some opinions while we've got everybody here. Thanks.
So I'm sorry, were you finished? I was going to say, it sounds
Yep.
like you're looking for some feedback, because that if the commission is looking unfavorably on this plan, you're looking for some feedback as to what might be better received, put it that way. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And I would also ask, when people voice their opposition, to be a little more specific. Is it the roof line? Is it the dormer? Is it everything? Is it, the deck? Because the dormer on the other side would change a bit as well. So just, if we could be a little bit more specific about it, because, this obviously, that'd be interesting to me. Thanks.
Okay, all right. It's a reasonable request. And thank you. And don't forget to put your hand back down unless you have something else to say. Okay, now seeing no other hands, so we'll close the public hearing portion of the meeting and we'll turn to my fellow commissioners. Excuse me, a little hoarse tonight. Does anyone have any comments from among my peers here on what's been proposed?
Should we speak up or shall we wait for you to?
No, I always like to give you all the floor first.
Okay, I have things to say, and I do appreciate Mr. Long asking about, specifically what we would object to or what might be acceptable. So I'll explain that in determining when proposed roofline alterations are appropriate, we on this commission have to consult the Secretary of the Interior Standards. That's in section 5308, review procedures of the city's demolition delay ordinance. And that states, quote, if the property is located within the Newburyport National Register Historic District, the commission will reference the most recent copy of the Secretary of the Interior Standards. So when I look at this plan, I look at that section and I read that the standards recommend against, quote, substantially changing roofs, which are important in defining the overall character of the building. The standards, though, they don't only concern themselves with what is visible from a public way, although I will ask Caitlin, there's a photo that I had sent along. I don't know if that you can change it in page 3 of my document. Yeah, this shows the existing dormers, how visible they are. I'm just driving in my car a couple days ago down the street. So it shows that what's already there is highly visible because the leaves aren't on the tree anymore. And so that indicates to me that the proposed new dormer and deck would be highly visible. I also would like to recognize that the Merrimack River is a public way, but putting aside the views that we would have, the standards also concern themselves with the protection of the physical fabric of an historic property. So Christopher Fay has been absolutely right all along that the standards don't merely seek to protect the way something looks to us from a certain position in space. They seek to protect the historic fabric itself, even if it's not visible from public way. So the National Park Service says, quote, lacking adequate headroom at the attic level is the most common argument for roofline change. And the most common proposed solution is for, quote, very large and out of scale dormers with contemporary windows that contrast strongly with the traditional and subdued materials of an historic structure. The Secretary recommends against, quote, substantial alteration of the physical fabric of the roof itself and any alteration that imposes a new form on the roof. I just had a conversation about dormers this week with our friends at the Rockport Historical Society. And they explained that they stopped approving dormers when they realized that what was becoming the norm, or what they call 3-2 dormers. And by 3-2 dormers, they mean there's a desire to create a 3-story house out of a 2-story house by using attic space. And so our commission has not been reluctant to approve dormers. I think there's only one time that we outright impose a demo delay on a dormer, and that was on 2 Neptune Street at a 17th century house. When a dormer can be installed in a way that preserves the form and line of the house, we do approve. But the roof line of Mr. Long's house here, the Mariner Goodwin house, the roof line is a character defining architectural feature. So what I'm opposed to is raising the ridge height. This full length shed dormer that's 7 feet longer and a whole foot larger than what can be constructed by right. And as to the building code, if you can't structurally accommodate what's desired, then I would suggest that you don't build it. The dormer that's there now wouldn't have gotten approval since it meets the ridge line. It doesn't have the right setbacks. So the solution from my point of view on this commission is that you don't swap out one non-conforming dormer for another one that changes the whole roof line, raises the ridge, 5 inches and the mean roof height a whole foot. And so in my position will be that, to impose the demo delay, and if it expires, and Mr. Long, if you desire then to put on a conforming dormer, that's certainly your prerogative. But I agree with Mr. Coulter, John, that this is, a rare first period house and really highly visible from Water Street. So I think I better turn it over to Chris now. Thank you.
Actually, before I'll just interject something that you reminded me of, Patricia. I also took a look at the standards as well, because you're quite right that that's what we go by. And I was looking at the ones for the kind of the rehab standards as opposed to strictly the preservation standards, because we're talking about, changing a structure. And what struck out to me is, I'll just quote from it here: a property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use. And a new use, this isn't quite a new use, but sort of. That requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. The historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials, and is the key part, or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. And that's where I think we're looking at here, and I think that's what both public commenters talked about, was the alteration of what will be the spatial relationships, proportions, the characteristic salt box, which, you do see that side view when you're headed west or northwest on Water Street there. So anyway, I'll just interject that, but I would like to hear from anyone else on the commission that who has a thought or comment to contribute. Anyone? Yes,
Chris
Chris?
has his hand up.
Yep, I see that. Oh, you're muted, Christopher. Yep, okay. There you go.
So I would agree with one of the questions I had in general that I think Tom answered or addressed was how many salt boxes do we have in Newburyport? And I guess the answer is not many. I don't know the exact number. It doesn't really matter. But I don't know. I've got a lot of things to say about this. So I thought I would do it with a metaphor, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we live in an old house, as many of us do. And when we bought the house, there's carpeting up the stairs and down the hall to the second floor, and carpeting up here where I am. And so we finally decided the carpeting's old. It's probably circa 1980. We ripped it up this summer. And what we found underneath on the stairs was a wooden staircase, oak, old. When we pulled up the carpeting in a short, sort of narrow hallway on our second floor, we found a painted floor, but the carpet had been down for probably 35 years or so. And so we've tried our best to kind of get rid of the carpet and redo the floors as best we could. And it made me think about all these different houses that we look at and the discussions that we've had in terms of livability and convenience versus historic preservation and protection. And so at one point, carpeting, wall-to-wall carpeting was livable, it was convenient, and it was fashionable, but not in a house that I live in. But somebody put it down anyways. So it made me just sort of ponder this idea that we make these decisions, and I've said this before, in a moment in time that maybe affects us, but we also, in Newburyport and other places like Rockport and throughout New England, maybe, you know, when the carpet was put down, the city was probably still in a little bit of a rough shape, right? But we've come to this recognition that the image I'm looking at right now on my computer of the current back of the house with a deck and a dormer and an extension and sliding glass doors and I mean, it's got everything. This thing has everything in the back that somebody decided was a good idea. I don't know if the current owners did it. I don't know if the previous owners did it, but it doesn't do any justice to the house. And I don't think that just moving the deck from the sort of first floor up to the second floor, or the third floor, I guess, is going to do it any better. You know, it's a shame that this was done to this house whenever it was done the first time. I don't want to see, you know, two wrongs don't make a right, I guess, is the best way to put it. So I'm suggesting to the owner and echoing what Tom said, at best, leave well enough alone, or at best, restore it to maybe what it should look like. But if you can't do that, then leave it alone. Don't put a roof deck up on the second floor, third floor. Don't put the dormer, don't put the shed, whatever we're going to call it. It's not going to improve the house. I have no right to ask what the third floor is going to be used for, so I won't ask the question. But I'm curious about this sort of idea of the attic space in 21st century becoming the third floor of a house that really was designed to have two floors and an attic. So I would be opposed to this as it's currently proposed, and I would ask that, you know, no roof deck, no dormer, you know, figure something else out, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Anyone else on the commission that have a thought? So quiet. Let me just make sure I'm seeing everybody. Peter or Joe, no comments?
I don't have any problem with what's proposed. Frankly, I'm sympathetic to the concerns about preserving the historic salt box profile. I do have to, though, yield to the existing conditions of that facade, of that roof slope, and I don't think we're making a situation worse by realizing what's been proposed here, simply. But I don't feel strongly enough to you know, to argue it further.
Okay, thanks.
I would just say that, echoing what I said earlier, the dormer that's there right now, I don't like. It is an interruption. It's a bit of an aberration to what one expects from a salt box, and the dormer that is being proposed is just that much worse because it's still straight up against the side of the house, and now it's dead flat. So it moves farther from the salt box that this building is. And I agree with what Commissioners Fay and Petnick were saying, particularly with regards to the notion that unfortunately there are limitations. It's the third floor of this house has very low ceilings, and that makes it very difficult to make a change now that will affect the house for the remainder of its time. I think is doing it a disservice. We're stewards of these properties. We don't own them forever. We own them for that period of time that we do own them. And I think it's important to protect that, that legacy of historic architecture in Newburyport.
Okay, we've heard from just about everyone. Malcolm, I know we don't have your video, but you're on the phone. Did you have any comment you want to make on this before we consider a motion? Assuming you're there somewhere. JC's still around.
Not seeing him.
Oh no, did we lose Malcolm? All right, let's see. Okay. Okay. If there are no other comments from or deliberative comments from the board, if a motion should be in a positive grammar, so for lack of a better term. So we should have a motion to, well, let me think about this for a minute. There could be a motion to either to impose a demo delay. That would be one possible motion. Another alternative motion would be to approve the proposed plans. We could hear either one of those motions at this point. So would someone care to make one or the other of those?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that
Okay.
I move that we do what we can to protect the original historic integrity of this property and impose the demo delay.
Okay, so there's a motion to impose the demo delay. Is it seconded?
I'll second it.
Okay,
I'll
thank
second
you.
Yeah.
Okay, two seconds, second and a third. Okay, that was made by Mr. McNamee and seconded by Ms. Pecknick. So we'll take the roll. This is the motion to impose a demo delay. So I'll skip Mr. Conrath because I think we lost him somewhere along the line. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes on that as well. So what that means, I'm sure Mr. Griffin knows what that means for Mr. Long. So during this next year, there's a demolition delay, which means you can't go to tomorrow and get a demo permit. But usually, what happens, or often, I should say, not necessarily usually, often you can work with your architect, designer, whatever, and possibly come up with an alternative plan. I am a little skeptical. I think, as you've heard from a couple of my colleagues, just like the house I live in, it's 2-story and an attic. In my case, it's not a salt box, so there's a little bit more room in the attic. But hey, it's an attic, So there, as is not telling you anything you don't already know. There are real limits, physical limits on what you may or may not be able to do on that attic or third level. So not sure what else to tell you, but that's where we stand.
Chair Richards, there's I can't see if there's an attendee maybe with their hand raised, and I don't know why, but if you want to look at the thing and see who it is, and I don't know if it's Mr. Long or something.
Looks like Stephanie Nekatish, but the public comment period is ended.
Okay.
And we've had the motion and voted on it.
I wasn't sure if it was the owner or somebody else. I don't see the same thing you guys are seeing. So
Okay. And it looks like
Thank you.
she's taken her hand down. Yeah. Okay, let's move to the next item, which is 3 Hancock Street, and this should sound familiar to most of you. And for the benefit of the applicant, at our last at the meeting that this was last held, Vice Chair Pecknick wasn't able to attend, but she has gone through the video replay so that she could participate in the discussion. Of
But Chair Richards,
yes.
I did contact Diane to get the form to sign.
Right.
She's out till the 14th.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
I
understand.
sign that, so I can't. I don't
Okay,
know if I can
all right,
participate.
well, okay.
I did listen to the recording, but yeah.
Okay, so anyway, this is just a very brief recap. This has been before us twice before. This is the house, a very small house with a bit of an unusual roof line, and they're basically looking to raise the roof in the rear section, and they've gone through a couple of iterations. Will either Ms. Mead or Ms. Bowker be speaking on behalf of MTC, or the architect Scott Brown? Let's see.
Yes, this is Olympia Bowker from
Okay.
MTC. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and with me is Scott Brown, who will be able to delve into the nuances of the plans.
Okay, who wants to start?
I suppose I will start. So let's see. Can you hop to the next slide, please? Sure. We'll keep this very brief. The chair did an excellent job of recapping. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this project. On October 8th, we came before this commission and you voted that the property was indeed historically significant and preferably preserved. And while there was no release from demolition delay, the commission offered suggestions on the roof line and to the proposed plans. So maybe we can reach a successful conclusion to this. We came back on November 12th. And architect Scott Brown did present updated plans, and the commission offered further suggestions on window shape, location, and roof line. Next, please. All right, so the current iteration of the plans are to raise the rear roof 20 inches, beginning at the existing ridge and proceeding back to the rear of the house. This does not raise the peak of the roof, and the rear windows on the side of the house are to remain the same size in general location, except raised upwards to maintain proportionality with the new roof line. And Scott will discuss that more in detail in a little bit. Next. Yep, and here are existing conditions. We have an 1800 house, relatively small, approximately 2100 gross square feet, and short ceilings. Next. And here are photos of the existing conditions to refresh your recollection. Next. Side views. And here is the site plan. And now I will pass it over to Scott to explain the drawings.
Oh, good evening, everybody. Scott Brown, the architect for the project. Good to be with you all again this evening. So in the days immediately following our last meeting, I was pretty eager to get back out to the house and do some exploratory demolition. So Caitlin, if you could you please go to last slide in our presentation here. Slide 15. Here we go. Excellent. So, I put my tool belt on, I went out there, and this is the result of my handiwork. And I bet that none of you had any inkling that I was this talented. And so really the result of this exercise, what I was hoping to find was the sizes of the original window openings on the house. And what I did encounter was a major surprise. So what we're looking at here is this is the second floor window at the front right corner of the house. And what you can see there is that window that is currently there, pretty much there's some pretty old studs on, the right, left side. So the width of that sort of matches those old studs. What I did discover at the bottom of that window, I uncovered a beam. And you can see to the right there, I was surprised by that, because one of the things, if you can remember correctly, that we were trying to do, or I was proposing with some of the previous options that you had seen, was that I was planning to sort of increase the height of the windows, in large part because I felt like what was there was not sympathetic to the 1800 form. And, you know, there would have been much larger windows in 1800. So I encountered this beam. I was surprised by it. I peeled it back. And what I discovered is that this is the top plate of the original timber frame of the house. So Caitlin, if we could go to slide 12. So this is the gable end. And what you can see there on the diagonal, this is the main rafter of the timber frame. And if we go to the next slide, number 13, this is a little, you can actually see the notches where the, you know, the roof parlance used to be. So
this was a side window, correct?
yeah, side window,
Yeah.
right side of the house, gable end. So this was originally a 1.5 story house. It was never a 2-story house. And so I found that very interesting. So like in this room, I didn't find any original window openings. And, you know, and this is actually quite disturbing too, because from a structural standpoint, you know, what they did when they proposed to pop the top of this house was a very bad thing from a structural standpoint, because these entire exterior walls, they are essentially a hinge, and there's really nothing holding them together. So, you know, as we move forward here, that's going to be a challenge for us to sort of deal with that in a structurally sound way. So Caitlin, if you could go to sheet 10 of 15, which is our A2.2, which shows our, so this is a sheet that next one. Yeah, this, okay, all right, right here. So this is the sheet that I put together, you know, basically showing a comparison of a couple of the elevations, the front elevation, what we're currently proposing versus, you know, what is currently there now, and the left side elevation, what we're currently proposing, as opposed to, you know, the existing elevation. So on this sheet, the front elevation, what we're doing this round, we realize that we can't increase the height of the windows on the second floor, because that timber frame top plate is there, and cutting into that would be a very bad idea. So we're going to match the window openings that are there now. On the first floor, I am proposing to increase the height of those windows, but by only 4 inches. And can we go to the other sheet, Caitlin, A2.1?
Oh.
So this is all 4 of our proposed elevations. And you can see on both the right side and left side, I have some red dotted areas, which indicate the existing window openings as they are today. And those are the only window openings that we're actually proposing to change. So on the left side, you see 2 at the second floor at the left rear, where we're taking those existing window openings and lifting them up to sort of coincide with our new floor heights. Doing the same thing on the right side of the house, 2 window openings, second floor, moving them up. 1 window opening that we're infilling. And on the rear of the house, we're making so many changes on the rear of the house, I didn't bother putting in those red lines, because it would make a mess of the drawing. As for the roof change, we're no longer proposing to raise the ridge of the front half of the house. So that existing ridge is being left intact. Back of the house, we are proposing to raise that 20 inches. We've always been proposing to do that, and that's the section of the house where we really need the additional ceiling height. You know, as previously mentioned, we've got ceiling heights as low as 5'9" back there. So I believe that this proposal before you this evening is from the majority of the commission's comments at the last hearing. I do believe that this is what the commission wants to see. You know, again, we're keeping for the most part, the original window pattern intact, window sizes to match what's there now. And we're not proposing to raise the ridge on the front half of the house. So with that, I think we can open it up for discussion and questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I have one real quick question. Could you identify for us on these drawings, which was that window that you showed us the photograph
Front
of?
elevation, second floor, top right corner.
So, I'm sorry, which elevation?
Front elevation.
Front elevation.
Yep. Second floor, right there. Yep, that window right there. So that's the first window. That's the last slide in the set. That's a picture. That picture's taken from the inside of that room looking back. And on the right side elevation, that gable end window is the other one that I opened up to expose the main rafter of the original timber frame.
Yeah, I'm confused now because which is the one where we could see that that rafter that came down at an angle? That
Okay,
roof,
point out the right side elevation.
right side, yep.
Right side, upper left-hand corner.
Upper left-hand corner, yeah.
Yep, the second floor window that aligns with the existing ridge. That's right underneath the existing chimney.
Oh, okay.
Right there, that
Toward the
window.
front of the house.
Yeah,
Oh, I see. So
Yeah.
that whole roof has been raised up higher from
that's
where it
right.
was.
So at one time, this went for a complete roof line change. And, I believe this house over its history has had many, many alterations. There's some very curious things, happening on the back of the house.
Curiouser and curiouser, huh?
Yeah, so, so this is a bit, this is a major surprise. I was not expecting to find this.
Yeah.
And like I said, moving forward, this is going to present some challenges to us because that front wall is being held, considering that the whole point of the sheathing is to help hold everything together. And, old sheathing is laid horizontally and it's not tying that upper half of the wall to anything below. So that's a little disturbing, but that's something we're just going to have to deal with at the next level.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. It sounds like you're saying there's vertical support for the current eave is sort of missing.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. Okay, my colleagues, anyone have either a comment or a question? I do, in the spirit of the original, public hearings of demo plans review, will allow public comment if people feel the urge and need to do so. So if you are a member of the public, you can start queuing yourself up by raising your hand. But in the meantime, let me turn to my colleagues here. Any questions or commentary on what we've seen and heard?
Yes,
Mr.
this
Morgan.
is Joe Morgan. May I speak?
You may. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I think Mr. Brown did an excellent job in stating the challenge here. I believe the challenge is, in addition to the architectural preservation, it is really the structural issues that we have painfully discovered are always going to be present when we do modifications to exterior openings, windows, or changing a roof line. He's articulated the problem here relative to the front portion of the building in his discovery. His forensics has uncovered they have uncovered an existing condition, which he says is kind of a hinge condition because he doesn't have the structural integrity of that wall any longer really as an existing condition. So it's probably will have to be corrected. But I'm in that same argument, I would say that he's going to encounter that when he raises the roof on the side elevations. He's going to have that hinge condition where he's adding on to a wall, and in order to make that structurally to preserve the structural integrity of those walls, I don't know what his what resource he's going to avail himself of. I think though there's no way to get around it, that additional framing, if you have the luxury of being able to keep existing vintage framing in those walls, you're going to have to supplement it in some way, and it has to be done very deliberately in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So you've got both the correcting existing conditions, which I would hope his engineer is going to have a plan for, but the engineer would also have to have a design for then extending the walls upward to intercept a new roof line. So I would just like to know how we as the commission, as commissioners to preserve historic structures can receive some guarantee here. Does that require a more in-depth structural review of what is proposed? I understand Mr. Brown saying he'd like to say, well, that's down the way, that's the next chapter here, but historically, I don't think we have seen that next chapter. I think given the issues that have arisen at 12 Harrison, and now we're seeing this again and again and again, we're going to have to address the structural issues. And I don't know what the formal way of doing that is, Chair Richards, but I say that that's my major concern here is, and I thank Mr. Brown for also bringing that point up.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And it's very much apropos given, as you say, point out what's happened in that recent case where there's also roof raising, a little bit different, a little bit more extensive, but still, you're quite right that if you're raising a roof and you've already structural deficiencies have been identified, so the likelihood of finding additional ones and having to deal with those are I think the likelihood is high. Anyone else like to make a comment? Yes, no, maybe? Not seeing anyone making any wild gesticulations or gestures visually or hand-wise. So I'll briefly I'll allow public comment if there is any. I'm not seeing any hands at the moment. I'll just give a few seconds if there are members of the public who are attending the meeting who have any comment on this. We'll allow that, but if there aren't any, then we'll quickly move on. So I'll just pause for a second to see if anyone wants to raise a hand. Well, I keep my throat lubricated. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll close that public comment period again. I guess it's up to me to try to answer your question, Joe, as to how we, the NHC, deals with that. Let me ask either Mr. Brown or Ms. Bowker, has anyone or has this discovery been made too recently to do so, or has a structural engineering firm who's familiar with timber frame construction been consulted at all to do some more, to use Mr. Morgan's phrase, forensic deconstruction and investigation of structural issues?
Well, Mr. Richards, I'll answer that question. I did not intend to indicate in any way that this is going to sort of change our proposal or how we move forward with this project. We're well aware that we are not permitted to entirely reframe or rebuild any of these exterior walls. This situation, it's going to present some challenges to us, but and it was a bit of a surprise, but I think it's imminently solvable. And I did talk to the builder, who is also the applicant on this project. And one of the things we did talk about was having to plywood the inside of the walls. So, to have we're gonna just have to deal with this stuff down the road. There are probably gonna be a few surprises when we open up, other parts of the house. I only peeled back the walls and in this one little section, and but it's just something we're gonna have to deal with, and we're gonna have to deal with it in a very sensitive way.
Right. So it sounds like tell me if I would be correct to characterize your approach as keeping existing timber framing unless it's completely unsalvageable, which doesn't sound like, well, we don't know if it is or isn't, but as far as we know, it is. So it is okay. Excuse me. But and work from
decent, what I have seen, it appears to be in good shape, and it's
okay. And basically, you'll kind of work around it in the sense of reinforcing with additional dimensional lumber where required, plywood, whatever, without changing the exterior aspect of the dwelling as it is. Basically, it'll look like what you've planned here in terms of fenestration and profile and etc. One last thing, I'd like to hear from my colleagues if anyone has any feeling about the change in design from the old, the roof line had that sort of characteristic notch where it looked like, I don't know what to call it. It's kind of an unusual. It was like maybe it was a simple gabled structure that was added on in the back or something. I don't know how else to define it. Now the profile from the side view will have an unusual profile in the sense that there isn't any standard design that has that trapezoidal aspect or pentagonal maybe, but it's not totally unprecedented in that I think I've seen other cases. In fact, again, it harkens back to 12 Harrison Street in that house, if you recall, the original gambrel profile had been destroyed in the rear, not by the current owner, but back in sometime in the early 80s. They took that rear, the gambrel profile was eliminated, and the whole thing was kind of shedded out similar to this. So it's not unheard of. I'm curious if anyone has any issues with that, or if they find that it's no worse than it is today. Any comments on that? I'll tell you why I asked, because I'm thinking of proposing a motion that we allow a permit at this point, but have the applicant come back once they've done their, to kind of report in once they've done their the builders had a chance to get in there and do more interior demo to see what the structure is and all that. So basically to allow them to proceed, but to try to have some means of avoiding kind of an out of control train situation in terms of the demo. That makes sense? Yes, no, maybe?
May I speak again?
Yes, certainly, Joe.
I think that's fair. I do believe, though, we have to, as a commission, see supporting evidence of how the problem is going to be addressed structurally. I mean, as much as I'm sure all of us really don't want to see those details as part of our project presentation.
Right.
I do believe that we are now being we are being persuaded by recent events, and it's becoming incumbent on us to take an interest in the structural aspect. So to say that the builder who is also the owner, which we're familiar with that, is going to address this issue is not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a proposal. We need to understand how it will be addressed and how the vintage framing is going to be preserved on the house and be reinforced and made and the integrity of which will be preserved as they make modifications of openings and roof lines. So I would say that that would be added to your proposal, Chair Richards.
Okay, yes, and it occurs to me, thank you for pointing that out, Joe, and I actually agree with you, and it popped back to my working memory that I don't believe a demolition permit is even required to do the kind of exploratory interior demo that would be necessary to do that forensic, examination you call for. So I'm thinking that instead of that possible motion I was just talking about, the motion would be more along the lines of, and this isn't it yet, but I'm trying to put it together as we on the fly here. That the motion is to have the applicant come back to us when they can present the type of plan that you're just describing. And I would just ask how much is that clear enough to the applicant, or how specific do we need? I think you understand what we're after. We're looking for the builder to have a chance to do a thorough examination of the framing wherever it's going to be affected, not just in one spot, and it doesn't have to be down to the level of every nail detail, but it has to be to the level of, okay, we've inspected the structure, this is fine, this is not fine, this is how we're going to structurally address the issues that we found,
Mr. Richards, Scott
Yes.
Brown, this is really only an issue if we're intending to remove any exterior walls, and we're not proposing that,
Right, but the problem is, we want to avoid a situation where, I use the runaway train analogy. We want to have some degree of assurance that you and the builder know enough about what you're going to find, because you already, just in that relatively small exploration, uncovered some rather surprising things. Who knows what other surprises you're going to find? All we're asking, and I think it's pretty reasonable actually, to ask for a little more exploration on the part of you and or the builder to so that we all have a better idea what's going to be involved, and then I think we'll be good. We can be good to go. I don't think it's an unreasonable ask.
Can I speak?
Yes. Who is that speaking?
This is James. My name is James Bork. I'm the owner, the builder.
Okay.
So to me, this is a very, very, very slippery slope. As a builder in this town for the past 20 years, who's grown up in Amesbury and been building here forever, I've built dozens upon dozens of homes in Newburyport, and never once have I ever done anything out of line, out of character with building an awesome product. And this is starting to go in a way where I'm the builder, I'm the owner, but it's also how I make my living. And we're going on 5 weeks in the middle of a pandemic, and we've agreed to everything you've asked us to do. We kept the chimney. We kept the ridge, even though there isn't a ridge in there. We've exposed to you what we have. We've moved the windows the way you want them. We've changed it to a shed dormer, which I don't think is merely as good looking, but we'll do it if you tell us to. But now you want me to expose to partial demolition on the inside. So how exactly does that work? I hire a crew for 2 or 3 days, then lose them for 2 weeks and pull it apart, and then have you come in. So now you're coming inside the house to tell me what I can do and what I can't. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's what it sounds like I'm hearing. And that's a very slippery slope. And none of this, if you'd told me I had an 18-foot house on Hancock directly across the street from a 35-foot house, and I'm trying to raise what I thought was a very limited, very conservative and restrained 20-inch raise, I would have expected to be A little further along, I guess, than I am now, but it's not about that. You have a job to do, and I appreciate that. But due to Harrison Street, which you keep referring to and you say you're not going to, but you keep doing, and I've done so much work in this house with the old historical board, the old planning, zoning, and never once have I done anything out of line with what you've asked me to do. And yet this project keeps getting referred to Harrison Street. And I get it. I get it. You got someone that came in out of town, they destroyed it, they made a mockery of it. It's an embarrassment, it's a joke. That's not what I do. I have no problem with this taking some time, but the slope that it's heading right now is a very, very, very dangerous slope to me, because if you've got as much experience as you do in the building trade, as I would imagine, then you can imagine we're going to open this thing up and it's going to be a complete mess inside. There's nothing sound. There's nothing not rotted. There's nothing not built wrongly, improperly. The hinge point on the front is just that, a hinge point. So am I going to get a structural engineer to come in, design steel welded plates, take 2 or 3 weeks? I could not be building this thing for 2.5 to 3 months. It's been 2.5 months already. And this is how I make my living. So I'm trying to just understand this very slippery slope, which takes you inside the house and limits my ability to gut it and costs me probably 2 or 3 times what it would normally cost. My understanding is if the outside of these walls are not getting pulled down and I'm preserving them, that would be my objective as to how I saw fit to make and preserve this and maintain that structure. I don't need a committee to come in and tell me how to do it. That's what I do. That's my understanding was the outside of that building, the specifications on the plans, the character, the size, the integrity of what's drawn, and the spirit of what's presented to you is carried through. But now, because of Harrison Street, which we keep mentioning, and I've mentioned again, is brought up again and again. And that's the impetus. You now have an obligation as a board, because of what happened on Harrison Street, to ensure that doesn't. And I'm going to bear the brunt of that on the inside of this house. And on the last meeting, it was brought up quite a few times as well. We've done everything you've asked. I think trying to get inside this thing to tell me and figure out how to build it, and how to preserve it, I don't even know where my rights begin and end as a property owner, a homeowner, taxpayer. I'm not quite sure where this slope takes me. And I want to work with the board. I want to work with you guys. I always have. And I've always put out top-notch product. So I'm just very concerned, and I'm not quite sure where this takes me. I know that it delays my start time significantly. And this isn't about how much money can I make. This is about making a living right now. It's a very different thing. And I guess that's it. If my attorney is hearing this and has a comment, fine, or Scott, but
yeah,
I mean,
this is Scott Brown again. So if the commission has no objections to the design that's before you tonight, we would really, and it doesn't sound like there are any, we would really like to get this released from the delay. In terms of like how we're going to address this stuff, some of these issues that have been covered, I'd be happy to come back to this commission in the future once we've solved that stuff, and just present to you how we've done that. But again, we would really like this project to be released from the delay, because I believe that we've given you folks everything that you've asked for to this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just respond to a couple of things Mr. Borg said. The main misunderstanding, I think, is that this committee is not trying to tell you how to do the work or your job. What we're And as far as the comparison to 12 Harrison Street, has nothing to do with the characteristics of the applicant, how reliable or unreliable they are, and so on. So please don't take away that any disparagement of your integrity or capabilities as a builder. What we're trying to avoid is, and you know, you said you don't want, it's going to impinge on your ability to go in and gut it. Well, if you're going in to gut it, then why is, you know, then you're going to be tearing down interior walls, are you not? So I guess what all we're looking for is, we're not trying to tell you how to build, support, solve structural issues or any of that. What we're trying to, the piece that the little safety valve I'm trying to build in somehow is that once you've started your interior demolition and making whatever arrangements structural arrangements I'm assuming you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't know exactly what structural things you're going to need to change because you don't have all the details of what the framing is today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So I assume that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're going to do this interior gut, and then you're going to expose the framing, and then you're going to see, okay, here's what I need to do to make things structurally sound and change my roof line. Is that also correct?
That's correct.
All right. So what we're trying to avoid is, or what we're trying, not avoid, but we're trying to build in is some way of ensuring that things don't, that demolition doesn't go beyond what you and I have just described to further exterior demolition and framing demolition with, you know, that's all. So so there should be that built-in safety valve, so to speak. Like, for example, again with 12 Harrison Street, what was supposed to happen was, when it was discovered that further demolition was required, you know, come back to the building commissioner. I'm not sure what the details are, but say, hey, this is what we found. This is why we need additional demo, and, you know, get approval for that. I'm not sure whether it's a, you know, what the permit is exactly, but that's what was supposed to happen. That was what was missing in that case. Sounds like what
the difference is that, you know, we've worked in the city, and
right.
We know how this works.
Yeah, right. So that's what I was about to say. That sounds like the difference is that you're familiar with those requirements, and that you fully understand that that's what would be needed to be done.
And
right?
Chair
Yeah.
Richards, if I may, there is that built-in guarantee with approval of these plans as proposed, because if upon further demolition on the inside, Mr. Bork finds that the plans as approved are not feasible, they would have to come back. However, if the plans as approved are put into place and the exterior is not altered in any way except for as approved by the plans, while I appreciate this commission's concern about the interior framing and the framing of this structure, if the plans can be complied with, then there's I apologize, I'm muddling my words here, but if the plans can be complied with, then that's your guarantee. If they cannot be complied with, then we'll have to come back before there's going to be any additional exterior changes. So there doesn't need to be a follow-up or a further demolition or certification from a structural engineer, as long as the work can be done in accordance with the approved plans.
It sounds like you're saying that, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like what you just said was that as long as you can conform to these plans, it doesn't matter how much demolition you do. Is that what you're saying?
As long as the plans can be conformed to as the commission has approved, and we are within the scope of what we're allowed to do underneath the bylaw and the historical guidance, then correct.
Okay, so part of what you're supposed to submit is, quote, a demolition plan. This, in fact, this is technically called a demolition plan review. So do you have architectural drawings such as the ones that's on the screen right now that show Like right now, the only thing in red I'm seeing is some window positions changing. I'm not seeing any.
Our DCOD calculation sheet clearly outlines the areas that we are removing.
Okay, so the ones that have the diagonal hatching are unchanged and the cross hatching is changed?
Correct.
Okay, so just so we're all clear on this, all the areas that are simply have the diagonal hatching, so those would not be affected. So it looks like we're affecting, and I can see with the window placement on the, starting from the upper left, moving clockwise. We've got some window placements and the window that's being filled in. On the rear elevation, some fairly extensive changes there, where you've got, I think, the lower right, you've got, I think you're putting in some sliding doors. I'm not sure what that was, I forget. Lower left, just some fairly small changes to the window openings. And on the front,
Small changes to the window openings at the first floor.
yeah,
Two.
Oh, I see. Looks like the first floor windows, the openings are slightly
Yeah,
different.
Making them 4 inches larger.
Right. Okay. So is everybody clear on that? And so, Mr. Morgan, how are you reassured at all, or do you still harbor reservations about releasing this for demo permit?
Well, I still, to use my benchmark case of 12-14 Harrison Street, which is extremely and so relevant here also, I have to say that I see the same possible misunderstanding occurring here if it isn't true that we as commissioners have no interest or actual legal opinion relative to what happens behind the visible skin of the building that we're talking about, and which was, of course, the argument by the attorney on 12 Harrison. Then there's really nothing else that we really need, as the lady just suggested. Once these are approved, the elevations, then the execution is by others, and we no longer have any interest. But if, for the reasons that created such scrutiny on 12 Harrison, if the framing, the vintage framing, the removal of original framing is something that we're concerned about, then I believe there has to be some kind of a caveat here, or some sort of follow-up representation by the builder or a structural engineer that they can achieve the design without removal of existing vintage materials and framing, and that they will be supplemented as required. Otherwise, we don't have any control or understanding of what will happen in the field once existing conditions are uncovered. I mean, do you understand that? I mean, I don't see any difference between this and really 12 Harrison at all.
Okay. Now, Mr. Bork, maybe you can address that. I understand.
Chair Richards, Mr. McNamee has had his hand up for quite some time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been looking at the panelists here. Yeah, go ahead, Peter. And I'll get one here from Mr. Bork as well, but why don't you go ahead, Peter? You there? Mr. McNamee, did you?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was muted.
Yep.
Mr. Bork refers to a slippery slope, and I don't disagree with him. I think, though, that I see a different slippery slope than he sees. I respect everything that he says with regard to all the work that he's done in the area and having grown in the area and operating a business in the area. And that's something that we definitely need to take into consideration, but not to the exclusion of our duty to make sure that we're protecting these properties in the city. Now, having said all that, our first and foremost obligation is to make sure that these buildings present themselves in an historical context that's consistent with Newburyport and consistent with their original designs. and protect it from moving farther and farther away. And that's the slippery slope that I worry about. So irrespective of the design of what's in front of us, which this is an eccentric little house, and I'm pleased to see it getting back a presentable facade, so the roof line doesn't bother me that much in this slight trade-off. But when it comes to questions of the structure and whatnot, that to me does feel like a slippery slope. I think we make recommendation to the building department, to to other boards to monitor that project, so that what happened at 12 Harrison, which is directly relevant to this, and I understand Mr. Bork not liking that comparison, but it is directly relevant, so that doesn't happen again. Now, he points out that he's been here for a long time and has done a lot of projects, and that matters a great deal. The owner builder at Harrison didn't have any of that, and clearly operated under as I said at the last meeting, with an intent of asking forgiveness rather than permission. Our job is to make sure that we don't set up a condition where that can happen again. So I would be in favor of lifting the delay and making those recommendations to the appropriate boards, and making sure that we stay on top of this job, irrespective of the fact that this is a man with a lot of history in the area, because everybody has to follow the rules. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Peter. Okay, and I see, no, Mr. Bork, your hand is up. Did you want to respond to anything that's been said, or was that just left up from before?
It was just left up from before, sorry.
Okay. I wonder, is anyone else on? Let me just double check, make sure I'm not missing any raised hand or anything. Does anyone else on Commissioner have any other comment? Because if not, I was going to ask Mr. McNamee if he tried to craft that last bit of thing into a motion to, to kind of a lift the demo delay with conditions, so to speak, or with that caveat or whatever. I'm kind of struggling here with exactly how to word that.
Well, I think we need to discuss before we make a motion what mechanisms we do have at our disposal for monitoring this sort of thing. Now that we've had the experience of 12 Harris Street, again, not that this is going to be the same thing, but these are the conditions that we faced at 12 Harrison. What mechanisms do we have at our disposal?
I think the only ones I'm aware of are the building commissioner and the code enforcement officer. Probably the building commissioner. I know they make routine inspections at various stages. I have to confess, I'm not. Actually, probably Mr. Bork knows better than I do for sure as to what's typically they have scheduled inspections at various stages of a project like this. But we could perhaps maybe if there isn't any planned and scheduled inspection at the point where the interior has been the framing has been exposed, put it that way, which is going to happen anyway. That's not a new requirement that we're imposing. That's something that the builder has to do as a matter of course, that the building inspector stop by at that point and discuss it with the, meet with the builder and review that to see if there's any impediment or any reason why any unusual demolition like what happened on Harrison Street would need to go or be done or not. Does that make sense?
That sounds like this. Yeah, let me take a stab at a motion here. I move that we lift the demo delay and release it for construction, but we write recommendation to the building commissioner and any other body that may be relevant that this should be inspected at regular intervals and certainly during the demolition stage, and report back to the Historic Commission and halt construction if he finds that there is substantial change being made to the original framing of the property. Because while we are protecting the facades of these buildings, the original framing is part of the history of this property. So that needs to be protected as well. Does that motion make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. Particularly, like I say, that inspection, I think, should take place when the framing is exposed. I think is the critical point. Does that motion have a second?
I will second that motion, Chair
Right,
Richards.
Mr. Morgan has seconded that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I just want to take the opportunity to remind the commission that it does not appear to be within their jurisdiction to govern the inside of the house. I don't believe a stop work order is within the commission's authority to impose. I do understand the advisement that they can give the building inspector, but I think that particular aspect of this condition is exceeding your authority a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Maybe I misheard it, but I didn't hear that you're correct that the Historical Commission does not have the authority to impose a stop work order. That would be something that I think it's the building commissioner or the zoning enforcement officer would be involved with, not us. So what would happen, I think the spirit of Mr. McNamee's motion is that we would have the building commissioner make this inspection with the understanding that if there was the kind of problem we were seeing or had seen in the past, that that something be done, whether it's a stop work or some other remedy.
I appreciate that concern, but I don't believe the commission can confer jurisdiction under the building inspector to stop work over historical concerns.
Okay, well, your objection is noted. Hopefully, I think we all hope that won't have to be, tested legally, so to speak.
Chair Richards?
Yeah.
I do want to make the point that the Historical Commission, of course, does have the jurisdiction to require that there be an independent structural engineering report as a condition of releasing the demo delay. So if that's preferable to the applicant, maybe that's preferable to the applicant.
Okay, we can certainly ask that. That is correct. That's a question for either the attorney or the owner, whether that is preferable. What Ms. Pecknick is referring to is that the ordinances give us the authority to ask for an independent structural engineering report, which would be done by an independent structural engineer and would be paid for by the applicant. Was that preferable to this motion that's on the floor at the moment?
Mr. Richards, you're asking the applicant?
Yes. If they would rather do that than have this particular, suffer this particular motion, which is really not much suffering as far as I can see.
I'm not quite sure what the independent report's going to achieve.
Yeah.
For either party.
Well, what it would achieve,
I would say no to the latter. I would just go with the board. I would keep going on the same path we're going on, not knowing the engineer, not knowing the scope, not knowing is too many unknowns for me to really have a vote of, be sure of how I feel, because there's just so many unknowns. Whereas, I think if you move forward the way it's going right now, it becomes something that we can work out later. Type of thing. We're going to find out later, I guess.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like from everything you've said, that was Mr. Bork speaking.
Yes, it was, sorry.
Yeah. Sounds like from everything you've said and from what you know and don't know at today about the property, that you're not expecting highly unusual challenges that can't be met without a problem.
I don't think so. And I mean, you guys have to, you guys clearly have to be careful. I mean, I've seen Harrison, I always looked at it, and I could see how that would certainly set a precedent. I get it. But I will tell you, the board, that that is not how my company operates. And I know I could sell the project tomorrow, so it's only worth the wait it's, spoken through. But yeah, I mean, we're a different type of company. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, but I do get where we're at. So I think moving forward without introducing another third party right now will be the most streamlined and fastest, and at the end yield the best results too for everybody.
Okay. All right. So just to reiterate, so we're all on the same page. The motion is to lift the demo delay and I'll take responsibility for making a written request with the building inspector. I'll probably have a discussion with them to explain what the concerns are. I'm sure that'll be fairly easy to understand given recent history. And I don't anticipate that will be a problem for the building inspector. I expect that they'll probably be okay with doing that.
Mr. Morgan has his hand up as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Did you have a concern or?
Yes,
Joe?
just a quick question for the applicant. Is there a structural engineer, and this is for the architect also, is there a structural engineer on the project right now consulting?
No.
Will a structural engineer be retained during the design in order to review the existing structure and to design appropriate reinforcements for the additions for the roof, or is this going to be a builder's design?
Typically, we do retain a structural engineer at an appropriate time.
Will the building department be requiring a structural engineer's stamp for any modifications to this building?
They usually do not for a project of this type.
I see.
My stamp is usually sufficient enough for the building department.
I see. But as an architect, you would want to avoid liability in designing some of these.
Correct. We don't do any beam calculations or any calculations of any kind in-house. Our job is as difficult as it already is.
So the structural engineer, just to take it one step further, would need to visit the structure, review existing structures, because we were told at 1214 Harrison that the structural engineer had not visited the site prior to demolition work proceeding. So
it's a good question.
We would like to make sure that the structural engineer understands the existing conditions, at the very least, before completing her design.
Sometimes that makes sense. We don't always do that for every project. It's really comes down to sort of the complexity of what we're dealing with.
Right. I mean,
field and whether or not we can convey the complexity to the engineer without them having to come out to the site. So it's really project specific. So we're going to have to uncover some things and then figure out what the next step is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Some really pertinent questions there. So let's see, let me check this time. I take it, Joe, your hand is still up, but that's just a remnant, I take it? Okay, it was. All right, so why don't I think we're ready to take a vote on the motion. Hopefully everyone remembers what it was. It's been stated and restated. Mr. Fay? A yes vote is to I will read it a third time. A yes vote or in favor vote here is would release the demo delay, and with those the conditions discussed about working with the building inspector to ensure that the easiest way to put it is that we avoid a situation similar to what happened at Harrison Street. No.
I'm inclined to vote no for the simple reason that I would have to agree with the owner that I don't really see this as being part of our jurisdiction. So if that's the entire proposal, the entire motion, I would actually be a no vote. I have no problem releasing it for demo delay, but I think I feel like we've gone down a hole here that we're just not, it's just not our jurisdiction. So I'm a no.
Okay. Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick?
I am not voting. I am not I
Oh,
can't
okay.
participate.
Well, in that case, regardless of which way I vote or don't vote, it's going to fail because we only have 2 yays, and even if I would vote a yes, but that's still only 3. We're short of the 4 required to pass, so that motion fails. Chris, do you want to make an alternative motion that it simply be the demo delay be released, and we can see if that passes?
Yeah, I would make that motion because I think that I'm certainly sympathetic to what happened at Harrison Street, what also happened on Bromfield Street. But I think that, and I understand the concerns, we want to avoid that. I'm just not sure that I see the comparison here. I'm not an architect, I'm not a structural engineer. So I would make the motion that we just simply release the demo delay.
Okay, is there a second for that one?
Second.
Was that Mr. Bork?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know my seat was on.
Nice try. Is there a second from a commissioner?
I'll second it.
Okay, it was Peter. Thank you, Peter. All right, so we'll go around the horn again. Mr. Fay?
I'm a yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
I have to say no, because I see the structural issues as part of the problem.
Okay, and I assume you're still abstaining, Ms. Pecknick, for various reasons?
Well, I didn't participate in the last
Right.
conversation about it. So I don't want to poison the decision here by
Right.
improperly voting.
Well, I don't know what the ordinance says about whether you have to have the paperwork signed prior to being sort of made legal again, but we'll err on the side of caution, so that's fine. So that motion fails as well because we don't have 4 yes votes. So trying to think of is there a path forward tonight or what? I guess we could simply come back when we have additional members. We can try to get Mr. Carnwath back on, although he wouldn't be able to vote because he didn't hear tonight's discussion. That wouldn't help. But Patricia, you can get your legal okay to sort of join in the discussion, and you can at least vote either way. It's not necessarily a guarantee that it'll pass. Can anyone, mainly either Peter, Joe, or Chris, who've been involved in this, can anyone think of a motion that they think might pass to move this on forward, or are we stuck here for the
I have
moment?
a question. So as a parliamentary question, we currently have 6 people on the commission, right? Because we've had resignation. We have 1 abstention and 1 absent. So that's not, you need to have 4 votes.
Yeah, my understanding is that we still need to have 4 votes to pass a motion. Yeah, that's why.
So if we had
if
we had 3 people on the commission, we wouldn't ever get 4 votes. We could never move anything forward.
What?
So if 3 people resigned right now.
Yeah. Actually, let me think for a minute. Caitlin, do you happen to remember? It's possible I'm wrong about that.
We have a quorum, and I don't know. I mean, I'd hate to make a
Yeah.
mistake, but since we have 5 people in the room, we have, well, at least 2 yeses, 1 noes, and 1 abstention.
Yep.
So even if you abstained, I would think it would have to carry, but again, I'm not.
Well, Caitlin, do you happen to remember if it's
Yeah,
a
Glenn, I
majority?
don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's for Malcolm, is in and out of this meeting. So I just think to feel comfortable, I think you should probably, wait to check and get consistent membership on this Zoom call, before you vote, on like a reduced number of people.
Okay, so you don't happen to remember if the ordinance calls for a majority of those present, assuming a quorum. I might be able to look up real quick here. Let me see. Just give me just 1 minute. I've got powers and governance and termination. Quorum format. Any approval with provisos, disapproval or disapproval recommendations shall require a positive vote of a quorum, which is 4 members of the commission. All right, so so by ordinance, we have to have 4 votes either way. So that answers the question.
Can you read it again, Glenn?
Yes, okay, sorry. Okay, under section 2-102 governance, part C, quorum, 4 members of the commission, which is a simple majority of its members, shall constitute a quorum. Any approval with provisos, disapproval or disapproval with recommendations shall require a positive vote of a quorum, which is defined as 4 members. I added that last phrase, which is defined as 4
So
members.
it's not defined, I don't want to belabor this, but it doesn't define a quorum as 4 members and then a positive vote of, so you could have a minimum of 4 members, right? Which is what we have.
It does define a quorum as 4 members.
So then a positive, I don't know, again, not a lawyer,
Yeah.
but a positive vote of a quorum would be at least 3 votes. That would be my interpretation. I don't know, maybe
Well-
Peter has a different interpretation.
Chair Richards.
Well, go ahead.
Richards, just to help, procedurally, if you might wish to confirm that our preservation ordinances protect the framing of a house, which
Yeah.
they do. I don't know if that makes a difference to the discussions that you're having on this.
Yeah, that is a question. I'm going to make a note of that.
They do, yeah.
Oh, they
Yeah,
do?
yes, no, I'm saying yes, they do. Just to clarify, they do.
I'm sorry. You're saying that you've checked and the ordinances say that our jurisdiction does extend over framing?
Yeah, that's the whole point. We don't just protect the exterior appearance of the house. We protect the shape and form of the house and its framing and its walls.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Peknicki, are you looking at the language of that? Is it specifically saying the framing and is it referencing historic framing or just framing in general? Which probably is essentially.
I'll look up the ordinance while you guys are.
Mr. Chair, maybe a solution here, because I think that everyone, based on what I've heard so far, is everyone would like to see the project move forward at this point. We have concerns about the framing and we have concerns about our jurisdiction. So perhaps we could craft a different motion that allows us to move forward and does present advice to the zoning board or the building commissioner or whatnot, that this is an area of concern of the historic commission and is to be considered. And simply state it as as that. I think we're close enough in time to 12 Harris Street that everyone is going to follow through accordingly based on that.
Yeah. That sounds, what would you add to Mr. Fay's motion that we simply,
I would
release?
streamline the motion to say that we release the building, we release it from demo delay, and the language is important here. I don't know if recommend is a word that we can't use. Recommend consideration of protecting the historic structure throughout the process of construction.
By
I think-
talking about recommend the consideration of the historic structure by the builder, contractor.
No, of the building commissioner. Recommend to the building commissioner, or the word is going to either be recommend or advise the building commissioner to monitor the process, monitor the construction in such ways to protect the framing of the structure, consistent with the building commissioner's jurisdiction. That way we're placing it in their jurisdiction and we're simply making a recommendation.
Right.
I think Commissioner Morgan's point is well taken, and I agree with it. And Commissioner Pecknick's point that we are responsible for the framing of the structure, the historic framing, is significant too. But like Commissioner Fay, and certainly like the owner, I'd like to see this project move forward because I don't think we're doing this building any harm.
Okay. All right. I think, Mr. Fay, let me ask you, because I know you were concerned about overstepping our jurisdictional bounds. I don't really think we are here. We're simply kind of reminding and advising / recommending that the building commissioner, letting them know our concerns about this because of, recent events, shall we say. Would you be willing to second this particular motion, or does it still concern you negatively?
Again, I don't want to hold this up tonight or moving forward. I think that I just don't think it's the incumbent upon the owner of the property to I don't know, the mechanism here doesn't really work for me. But if this will move it forward, I will agree with I will second Peter's motion.
Okay.
So
All right. So
I will
trying to
change.
state it in its simplest terms, the motion is to release or lift the demo delay and have the NHC, namely via me as chair, to communicate with the building commissioner some of these concerns we've discussed, so that he can keep an eye on things appropriately, as he would normally do anyway, but just as kind of a additional or, slightly heightened level of concern. So that's basically the motion before us. So I'll go around again. Mr. Fay?
I'll change my vote to yes on the last.
Okay. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Morgan?
I still feel really uncomfortable about this. I mean, by removing the demolition delay, we have no control over contingencies going forward here. Unless we have a strong buy-in from the building department that they will be doing inspections. We're saying we're allowing the work to proceed without having a plan in place that addresses the structural issues. And that can only be done two ways. One, we get a structural engineering evaluation of the structure now, as part of the design process, or we rely on enforcement during construction. And you're saying what we're going to do is we're going to rely on, and this isn't even construction, this is demolition. This is a demolition permit. And to what capacity, I mean, how are we engaging the building department in that role by this decision? How you know, what guarantee do we have?
Well,
I'd like to be able to say yes. I'd love to be able to release the project. I don't see any problem with it architecturally, but there's a piece of this that we keep talking about that has not been resolved.
and so the two possible resolutions you see are either a structural report based on an examination of the existing conditions, or B, some assurance from the actual people who would be doing the inspections, like the building superintendent, building inspector, commissioner, whatever the title is, that they understand the concerns and can and will perform whatever inspections are required to.
Right, that there are procedures in place that they can document the demolition in progress and enforce the preservation aspects of the ordinance.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying
have to vote. I have to vote no based on what I'm, and you know, I just don't think we can kick the can down the road without knowing what's down the road on this.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and I'm trying to think if there's. All right, let's finish this vote. So we have 2 yeses, 2 abstentions. I'm willing to vote a yes on this just for the record, but it still doesn't pass. Trying to think if there's a way without having to wait for another meeting of the commission to somehow make that release conditional, but I'm not sure how I can do that or how we can do that. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying make the lifting of the demo delay conditional on getting that assurance from the commissioner, which would require, obviously I can't call them up right now and do that. So would the commission be comfortable taking if there was a motion, let's say, to release the demo delay, if and only if the chair can meet with the building commissioner and secure their agreement in writing, might be an email or something, that they can effectively monitor the demolition to avoid the kinds of excessive demolition that we're concerned about. Would that meet your standard, Mr. Morgan?
What is it? Does it entail a vote tonight?
Yes, the vote tonight would be that the demo delay is lifted if and only if it wouldn't be lifted tonight or tomorrow. It would be lifted only upon written assurance from the building commissioner that they can effectively monitor the demolition to avoid a repeat of the adverse situation we saw recently, such as at Harrison Street.
And do we get a report back sometime? Is it before the next meeting or at the next meeting? We would get a resolution on that.
I would hope so. I would try to meet with them, starting tomorrow and next week. Now I'll have to be careful about what can and cannot be done outside of an open meeting because of the open meeting laws. So, but we can certainly, I can give a report back to all the commissioners saying that's not a deliberation, but it's simply that here are the results of my meeting with the building commissioner. Either A, which would be one of 2 things, that commitment in writing that he can appropriately follow up to ensure that the demolition is appropriate, or B, he cannot do so, in which case the demo delay would still be in effect.
I'm okay with that. I foresee many projects going forward where we have this same conversation. I just don't, there needs to be some sort of a procedural,
Yeah,
something in place so we
Yeah.
don't have to have this conversation again. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
this is fine. I think this is really good to clarify some things. These things have needed clarification.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be part of that process in doing so. But we need to close it so that everyone has the same understanding of of this issue going forward.
yeah,
And Morgan, that's why this is on the agenda for tonight. You know, after these applications, that's the topic. Indeed, you know.
yeah, and I would also say, Joe, that is what I would probably try to have both the zoning enforcement officer, Ms. Blanchet, and as part of those discussions with the building commissioner as well, so that, you know, everyone's on the same page, everyone's in the loop, and to see how we can have a more consistent procedure going forward on cases like this.
Okay, well, I can give you a yes based on that on that conditioned proposal.
Okay, so I'll see if I can craft that as a motion. The motion is to release the demo delay if, and let me write it down, if and only if written assurance from the building inspector or commissioner that he or she, I think it's he, can and will monitor construction consistent with his role to avoid excessive demolition. Does that sound, does that motion have a second? If there's no second, there's no vote, no motion.
I will second it. I will second it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fay. Okay, so we'll try
Mr.
again.
Chair,
Yes?
I apologize. This is Andy Port.
Yep.
I apologize. I couldn't get here. I was actually at a very long meeting that started at 6 p.m. So I apologize. I couldn't be here sooner, but if I can be at all helpful in the discussion that you're having right now regarding this project or the condition, I guess, that's being contemplated, just let me know.
Okay, did you hear the motion that I just introduced, Andy? Andy?
Sorry, say that again?
Did you hear the motion that we were just about to vote on a motion? Did you hear what the motion was?
My understanding is the motion is to require regular inspections, but to release the demo on this. Is that right?
Almost. The motion is to release the demo delay if and only if a written assurance can be gotten from the building commissioner that he can and will monitor construction to avoid excessive demolition, similar to what we saw at Harrison Street.
Okay, so in this case, and I'm sorry, just to be clear, so we have an acting building commissioners to fill the gap in terms of hiring right now.
Okay.
So I assume that's what you would get in the next couple of weeks if that were happening.
Yeah.
But that would be some sort of, this would be conditional upon some sort of written, perhaps an email to the commission,
Yep.
confirmation that the building commissioner can provide inspections to make sure that the demolition work is proceeding reasonably or consistent with what has been
Yep.
submitted here.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
Got it. And may I ask, and just my own thought on this, I'm wondering if it would perhaps make more sense to have the zoning administrator provide that as opposed to the building commissioner, but perhaps.
Well, I thought of building commissioner because I assume that that's the person that actually goes out to do the inspection, but it could be Jennifer as well. And I was going to involve her in that discussion. So I'm willing to go with whoever you think is the most appropriate and effective.
My own suggestion would be the zoning administrator. I think partly there's been, I've only been here for 10 years, but there's been history before that about, questions about how the building commissioners handle these type of issues under zoning or historic preservation versus the building code. And Jennifer is also within the Office of Planning and Development. So from my perspective, it would seem to make more sense to ask her to provide that confirmation to the commission that she'll keep those periodic visits to the site rather than the building commissioner, especially since there's a turnover happening there right now.
Right. Yeah, I want to go with what's going to work the most effectively. All right, so I've made while you were speaking, and I made a slight modification to that motion, which I'll now repeat and see if.
Glenn, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, but what is it? Is Andy clear on the fact that what you guys are looking for is assurance that the structure can withstand the work, right? So you were deciding between an independent structural engineer's report or having somebody from the city monitor the work. Is that so? From the zoning administration, you would be getting the same thing you would be getting from a structural engineer's report. Is that what's happening?
To the very last thing you said, I don't think those are quite the same thing.
I don't either. So I don't either. Okay.
What we would be getting from the zoning enforcement administrator would be the assurance that we're not, to use that phrase I've used now, this will be the third time, the runaway train effect, where demolition starts and then things are discovered and then it kind of just snowballs out of control and you end up with nothing left. That's the situation we're trying to avoid. And which I'm sure Andy understands as well. And I'm sure everyone, Jennifer will understand as well. We all understand because this, for better or worse for Mr. Bork, that everyone's got the Harrison Street example still fresh in our mind. Because, so that's what it is. I personally feel that it's within that the planning office staff, specifically Jennifer, is capable of being our eyes and ears to ensure that things don't get out of control. So I'm okay with that. Without having the engineering report, but we can, So that's the motion. So as the motion restate, oh, sorry, I didn't restate it. That the demo delay would be released if and only if there's written assurance from either the acting building commissioner or the let me change it, from the zoning enforcement officer. Is her title zoning administrator or zoning enforcement officer, Andy?
Zoning administrator.
Okay.
She does do the enforcement. That's part of her duties, but yeah.
Okay, that she can and will monitor construction consistent with that role to avoid excessive demolition, as at Harrison Street. So that is the motion currently proposed. Does that one have a second?
Second.
Okay, who was that?
Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So we'll go around. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, you're a yes. Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Morgan?
No, that's
No.
not acceptable.
Okay. And so I would be a yes, but the motion fails. So it sounds like you would want to see a structural engineering report, Joe?
Yes, if the city can't with its own forces do this verification, then there will have to be an outside structural report. That would be the recommendation that I would give.
Okay. On existing conditions, right?
That's correct. Existing structural conditions, exactly. And relative to the proposed design.
Right. Okay, so why don't we have yet another motion? This time it's to require the applicant to provide a structural engineering report on existing structural conditions relative to the proposed design. If that's the gist of your aim, Joe, you can just say.
Chair
moved.
Chair
Yeah.
Richards, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Who's
Would
speaking?
you, this is Attorney Bowker.
Mm-hmm.
Would this commission kindly entertain a continuance so we can resolve this on another night?
We can certainly take a motion on that.
I move that we continue.
I second.
Topic.
Okay, do we have Andy or Caitlin, do we have the date that we would continue to?
Yeah, just checking. You're talking into January at this point, I assume.
Yes.
I think so. I don't think we have another meeting in December, right?
Right. So that would, the earliest date would be January 14th. After that, it would be the 28th.
So, Ms. Bowker, do you want to continue to January 14th?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So, all right. So there's a motion to continue the matter without prejudice to the 14th of January. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fay. So hang on a second. I'll take a vote on that. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Are you still kind of not voting on these matters, Patricia?
But I will be in January. I'll make sure I
Okay.
fill out the
Okay.
paper.
Okay, well, we don't need you to carry this because we do have 4, with my vote, yes vote, we have 4 in the affirmative. So the motion to continue it to 14 January, dare I write it, 2021 is passed. Okay, and hopefully I will, and this is addressed to the applicant and their attorney, that in the meantime, this board will also do a little more digging into some of to try to make sure we have all our ducks in a row as far as how far our jurisdiction extends and how best to expedite these things going forward. All right, so thank you for your participation in this somewhat lengthy discussion.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Perfect. We'll see you folks next year.
Yeah, well, next year isn't that far off now. All right, thank you.
Good night.
Oh, okay, the most of the other matters on the agenda actually, I correct myself. There is one that might engender some discussion. 3 Liberty Street. The applicant is proposing to replace a first floor historic window at 3 Liberty Street. This is a little bit, there's some oddities here in that normally window replacements would fall into that demolition overlay district, downtown demolition overlay district, which has very specific rules about changing out windows. For some reason, I guess they went for a variance from the ZBA to vary from those window regulations in the DOD. I think I heard some of that discussion at the ZBA meeting, and where there were various proposals and so forth and so on. Andy, if I could ask you to, just for the sake of the board, I think you or Caitlin are familiar with this. Has the Zoning Board of Appeals formally asked for an opinion from the NHC on this window, or what?
No, I think I should say that they have, I don't know whether they've actually stated that verbatim as a request, but they certainly are aware of, and I think they would appreciate it. I know that the office here has recommended that because it's parallel with what the planning board would get for input from the Historic Commission prior to a vote by the planning board in the downtown overlay district. I believe that based on the discussion we've had with the ZBA, that they're fully expecting that input, whatever that may be. I can't recall whether they actually specifically stated that, but I'm sure that they are interested in having that.
Okay. All right. So as Andy was pointing out, normally we would make an advisory report to the planning board, which is the special permit granting authority for these types of changes. So be that oddity as it may, is the, let me see, I thought I saw an attendee from Fig Tree here. Katie, does the applicant, looks like, what I see, a hand raised by a Brian Murphy. Is he unmuted, Mr. Murphy, or whoever that is? Yeah, you're unmuted. Is that the
Right.
correct name, Brian Murphy?
So I am one of the owners of Fig Tree Kitchen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Did you want to explain your situation?
Sure. We're requesting a variance to replace the fixed window at 3 Liberty Street with a functioning double hung window of like appearance, true divided light, similar to the windows installed on the upper floors of that same building, so that we could conduct business at the window. Currently, we're restricted because of the size of the space on having customers in the store. We have less than 150 square feet of customer facing space in our shop. So currently we're conducting business at the door, setting up a display of goods, because at a bakery you buy through what you see. So we set up a display of product at the door. The customers come to the door, look at the product, and make the purchase at the door. We're also conducting business online with curbside pickup. So when a customer drives up to do a curbside pickup, we have to move that display away from the door, ask the customer to step off the granite step there and step away so that we can go out the door, deliver to the curb, go back in, move the display back in front of the door, ask the customer to step back up and continue business there. If we were allowed to replace the window, we would be able to conduct walk-up business at the window for the time being. It would not be forever, just because of current COVID circumstances is what we're looking for, and then be able to go in and out the door to deliver curbside orders as well.
Okay. And why would you not use the window for the display you just described? It sound like you're saying you're displaying the stuff in the doorway? Did I get that right?
We are displaying in the doorway, yes, and we're selling through the doorway, but we would like to display in the window and sell through the window, and then use the door to go in and out to deliver curbside sales.
Okay. Is there any special reason why you don't display using the window now, so at least you don't have to move the display every time you want to use the door?
Well, then a customer would look in the window and then walk over to the door. I mean,
yeah,
it's just easier to have it in front of them when they're getting ready to order.
Mm-hmm.
They see something in the window, go to the door, forget what it was called, have to go back over the window.
Really? Okay. It's a few feet away. Okay. Anything else before I turn it over for questions from the my fellow commissioners?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. So, fellow commissioners, do you have any questions? And I'll mention that if there are members of the public who have a comment on this, we will allow that when the time comes. So I don't see any hands raised. Anyone have a question for Mr. Murphy on this? You're all very quiet. Okay, let's see. I do see a hand raise over on the attendee part, so I'll open a brief public comment period. Is Andy or Caitlin, can you unmute the first one I saw was Mr. Coulter-John?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tom.
Tom Coulter-John, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. The trust opposes this application and is concerned about the process. We believe this should be reviewed under the DOD ordinance for a special permit. There is no such thing as a COVID hardship for variances under the ordinance. What is proposed is a permanent change to the historic character of the building to solve a temporary problem. All of the first floor storefront windows in that entire block are fixed. Brian Murphy, who's here tonight, was kind enough to point out that there are 2 other movable windows in Market Square. But I would like to point out in response that those windows were installed prior to the DOD. And the DOD is certainly much more stringent and more greatly concerned with preservation of the downtown. Back in the 60s and 70s, during urban renewal, they examined all the old photos and saw that there were fixed windows on the first floor. So that's what they restored, coming as close to the original as possible. Now, to this day, we have a consistent pattern in the Market Square area. First floor storefront windows should not look like the second or third floor windows. It's simply not historically accurate. Having said all this, it does not mean they were unsympathetic to Fig Tree's problems during this COVID time. Other alternatives should be explored to solve the problem. One simple example might be to switch out their storm door, which they currently open when a customer arrives. The current storm door looks from a distance as though it is divided, although it is actually not. I am sure that they make storm doors with the top half, which slides or opens in some manner. They could explore this idea and others, which could be as or more economical than window replacement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Calder-John. I also see the hand of Ms. Nikodish. Can we unmute her to allow speaking? Okay, and Mr. Calder-John, you may put your hand down. Okay, Ms. Nikodish, are you able to speak?
I think I'm on.
Yep, you're on.
Thank you, Chairman Richards. Stephanie Nikotich, 93 High Street. First, and I apologize to this applicant. I know I'm out of order, but the reason I had raised my hand during 265 Merrimack when it was outside of public comment is I had a procedural concern with that. So maybe after Liberty Street has been discussed, if you could call on me, I just had a question about the procedure on that.
Okay, that might fit into, we have on the agenda, we have discussion of some of the procedural stuff. So that might be an appropriate place to bring that up if you can hang on to that.
Okay, thank you. So I had sent a written comment to you and to Ms. Pecknick. If the other board members have seen it, I don't need to repeat it. So that would be my other
yeah, I don't think that was circulated to the entire board, actually.
Okay. Well, I will try to make it brief because
okay.
It dovetails with what Mr. Calder-John said. I also, along with the, Preservation Trust and personally, I'm opposed to not only what the applicant wants to do to that window, but to this application being put through as a way to bypass the DOD regulations. So as Tom said, there a suggestion that both he and I made to the planning office and the ZBA is a more temporary solution, and that is a Dutch door, whether it is the primary door or a storm door. Replacement doors, unlike replacement windows, are easily and economically reversible alterations. Stock Dutch doors are readily available. Use of a Dutch door could be conditioned on proper storage and reinstallation of the existing door once COVID-19 is no longer an issue. This, a temporary solution to the applicant's temporary problem, addresses a question asked by a ZBA member at their initial hearing of this application. At the ZBA, the applicant responded, as he explained to you, that this would not be a solution because currently they are both displaying and selling goods at the door. Instead, they want to both display and sell goods through a new double hung window. I submit it would make as much or better sense to display goods and a menu in the current storefront window. Customers who want to buy will be a step or two from the door, allowing for easy ordering and pickup through the upper portion of a Dutch door. This would naturally provide some separation between shopping and buying customers, reducing the chance of congestion at the door. One of the benefits of this is there would be no loss of a character defining feature and no need for a variance. I believe a temporary door solution could be approved by planning office staff under the DOD. So there would be no need to attempt to bypass these regulations and appear before the ZBA. If that's an alternative that could finally be amenable to the applicant and certainly to commission members, that I would be pleased, but what's being proposed now, I completely object to. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Members of the public.
Could I still make a comment, please? I appreciate the suggestions and we'll take those to heart, but I did want to express my concern that it has been presented that we were trying to circumvent anything. When this arose, we went to City Hall and asked them the procedure to do, and we followed their instructions. There was no attempt whatsoever to circumvent any restrictions.
Okay. Did you go to the planning office?
We did.
And they told you to apply for this permit from the ZBA?
Yes.
Could I actually clarify, Glenn?
Sure.
Just to be clear, and again, there's I'm sure more background that folks might be interested in on different aspects of this. Again, this one window, but bottom line is we actually, for good reason, I think, met with you, Glenn, and the author of the ordinance out there in the field to take a look at this particular issue as we were looking at, I think, another set of windows as another issue in the downtown that same day. And this is prior to the application being filed. And there was a question about how could this particular situation be addressed and what's the appropriate path. We did discuss with the council drafter of the ordinance in question, and it was his suggestion, and there was consensus of the discussion that it would be better to have this filed as a variance. There was a discussion at that point about whether or not the council would sponsor an amendment to the ordinance, whether or not there was any vehicle to do it via special permit. And again, what came out of that discussion was that it would make sense to apply for a variance. And so that was the feedback that was provided to the applicant here. And so that's why you see them before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that's why you see the request for some input from the Historic Commission here. Again, we thought it would make sense to have all the key stakeholders, if you will, out there, including the chair of the Historic Commission and the drafter of the ordinance that's actually in question. And the way that conversation came out was a suggestion that it be done through a request for a variance from the ZBA. And so that is what the applicant here has done.
Okay. Well, I do remember that walk around, and my recollection is that it was we were trying to decide was the window historic or not, and that sort of thing. But in any event, what was the rationale for going with this variance rather than the standard, planning board DOD procedure?
Well, just to be clear and kind of boil it down to, there's one phrase in the particular section of the ordinance, and Jennifer Blanchet and I, the zoning administrator, and I had pointed out that we did not believe, and I think there was consensus over this in the field with Councilor Eigenman, who had drafted the original ordinance, that there was not a vehicle through a special permit or staff level review for this window issue because the ordinance actually prohibits a change in the operation of the window.
I
So
see.
the ordinance does not allow that by special permit even. It's something that then, in order to look for an exemption to that, requires an application for a variance. Now, it's up to the ZBA with input from the Historic Commission what to do with that, but we did not believe there was a legal path to a special permit for this window replacement that was proposed. And that's why the variance was suggested as the only alternative path available other than a zoning change, given that there was no interest in sponsoring the zoning change. That's what the option was that the applicant had to address this, the issue.
Okay, now I understand. All right, let's rephrase that slightly briefly. So because the ordinance expressly forbids a change in operation style, they were sent to the ZBA to look for a variance from that restriction, basically. Okay. Does everyone on the NHC understand that? So you do, okay. Sorry, so I got a sort of a thumbs up from Patricia. Hopefully everyone else does as well. So I guess, all right, so I take it that our job is to see what our sense is, the sense of the NHC, what we want to tell, or not tell in the sense of order, but how we want to advise the Zoning Board of Appeals as to whether or not they should, grant relief from this restriction. The restriction specifically that by ordinance, you cannot replace a window that's, let's say, non-operable, as it is in this case, with one that is operable. That is explicitly forbidden. So that's the relief. So they're seeking relief from that. So the ZBA has asked for, well, what does the NHC think? Do they think that's okay, or are they against it? Does any of my wonderful compatriots have an opinion? I
have an extensive opinion. May I ask Andy or Caitlin to put up this slide, this view of the building? It's just page 1 of the document.
Is that the one you're looking for?
Nope, the one after that.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what Glenn presented, but that's interesting too. So that's
that's how it looked before urban renewal. That's what it looked like.
Yes.
I'm sorry, was there, if you could clarify which visual, because maybe I'm missing one that you had sent.
Oh, there's a document that I sent to Caitlin. I know she showed something from page 3 of it earlier.
Is that?
Andy, you should have it in your email.
Was it sent today or?
Yeah, sent today with a couple documents, or I can, I guess, put it up myself.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just looking for, is this, the materials. Is it a Word document?
Yeah, it's a Word document. It says picnic materials.
Okay, yeah, I've got it here.
Okay,
sorry. Sorry, when things come in last minute, we don't have a chance.
Oh, I did send it a few days ago, I promise.
So hopefully now you can see this. I'll try to enlarge it a bit.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So, we kind of have to live in 3 time zones on this commission, right? We have to live in the architectural past and sort of, also think about the challenges of what's going on now, in this case, the pandemic, and then think about, how we want things to look in the future. So I agree that we can accommodate the challenges that this applicant is facing by recommending the Dutch door. If we review this application under the Secretary's standards for windows, or if we review it under storefronts, it wouldn't meet the standards. So just reviewing it under the standards for windows, right? Windows are a character defining feature of a building, and changes to a building's windows have a dramatic impact on the appearance of the structure. So this is a view here of this building from 1811. There's a symmetry in the first floor windows and doors. So you have 2 fixed storefront windows with 12 lights, then 2 wide doors topped with 12 lights in this semi-elliptical fan light, and then 1 center door with 5 lights in a fan light. And then Andy, if you can just show the page 2 of that, it shows building on Monroe Street, the Albert Courier block in Monroe. And we see that the end row house used to have a commercial use because the street level windows and door are different than those in the house next door. So yes, this is a language of the commercial versus the residential. I think Mr. Coulter-John mentioned that. So according to our city's guidelines on historic windows in the DOD, all the criteria for the guidelines for preservation and replacement of historic wood windows adopted in June 2019, and all the secretary's standards on windows need to be followed. The windows are candidates for replacement when they're irreparable, they're deteriorated beyond repair. If replaced, they should match the historic windows in design, you know, shadow lines, material detail. So yes, if this were going through the planning board under the DOD, the planning board would insist that the application meet all that window criteria. The Brosco window that's replaced, I would not approve that. I understand that the Dutch door might be problematic for the applicant in that people go in and out, but the same would be true of Buttermilk or Abe's. You know, people come in and out the door at the same time. And I also do understand from what happened at the ZBA that it was mentioned that there are a couple double hung windows around, but yeah, we didn't have the DOD ordinance. And one of the reasons we have it is because that's what happened at Starbucks, you know. It also has been argued that maybe the windows aren't original, but according to the National Park Service, they don't need to be original to be historic. And I'm quoting here from National Park Service, windows need not be original to a building. A roughly 50-year rule of thumb can be applied in establishing whether existing windows are historic and worthy of preservation. So we used that roughly 50-year rule of thumb on the Vera Windows application last spring. And we found that the Market Square windows installed at about the same time as these were historic and worthy of preservation or meticulously exacting replication, which, as you remember in that case, the applicant found, you know, prohibitively expensive because it was going to need a steel frame that would withstand, you know, wind loads. It's very important, though, to know that the Secretary of the Interior considers both the appearance and the operation of windows to be historic elements, and so does recommend preserving the manner in which windows operated. I also went down there, and I do maintain that someone my height isn't going to find it very easy to do business through the window. So I checked with other historic commissions around the country about pandemic related zoning variances. And what I was hearing from my phone conversations is that commissions are recommending Dutch doors or sort of snack bar style windows inside vestibules. And I had some great conversations with people about how vulnerable windows are when there is an emergency of some kind. Out in Minneapolis, they're getting slammed with applications to replace historic windows with security windows to deter looting in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. I used to live in Old Town Alexandria, and a lot of windows in 18th century buildings started being replaced in the 1940s when the airport was built. So people wanted soundproof windows. Then in the 70s, they wanted insulated windows because of the energy crisis. There were even some bulletproof windows. And each new window design sort of responds to it's called catastrophe design in preservation circles. And so according to, you know, the architectural review window policy that I looked at down there in their old town, they said, you know, there's always an emergency. There's always a reason to redesign windows or replace them. There's just not a good enough reason if you really are trying to protect the integrity of the building and its appearance. So I would like to take the long view and preserve this window, but support the Dutch door to meet the applicant's business needs. I think it's a reasonable solution and a practical solution. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Any other comments from the board? Anyone? Can I get a, let me do this in the form of a motion. Why don't I, hang on a second here. bear with me, we're getting there. A motion to have the chair draft a report stating essentially what I've been hearing from what Ms. Pecknick has described, that the opinion of the NHC is, hang on a second, I want to write this down so we get it right. Draft report that opinion of NHC is against the window change, but is favorable to a door change. Does the door change, does anyone think the door change needs to be temporary, or can that, is that a concern?
Yeah, that's something worth asking us, indeed.
Yeah, so how do you people feel about that? Would you want the change to it, like say if they decide to go with something like a Dutch door, would you want that to be temporary?
You know, depending on the
Required, I should
door,
say.
depending on the door. I mean, what I've heard from people around the country is that they were, you know, conditioning approval of the Dutch door on, sometimes on the design of the Dutch door, and also on,
Yeah.
you know, hey, you should switch back to the original door within 6 months after the governor lifts the state of emergency of the pandemic. You know, that,
Okay.
that is a standard recommendation.
All right, sounds like a temporary door change then. Yeah, because I think that if they wanted to make a permanent door change, that's something that they could, well, I'm not sure if they would require review of that, but I can, what I've got written here is that that there's a motion to have the chair draft a report that the opinion of the NHC is against the window change, but is favorable to a temporary door change. I'll just say to accommodate trade during the pandemic. Does that motion merit a second from someone?
I'm seconding it, yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pecknick. Mr. Fay, your vote on that? You're muted. Did we lose Mr. Fay? Okay, well, temporarily skip over him. Mr. McNamee? Hello, Peter?
That old mute button. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let me record that. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, the chair will vote a yes on that. Makes 1, 2, 3, 4. Are we still missing Mr. Fay? Yeah. Where is he? I don't. His video. He still says he's still in the meeting, but if you can hear me, Chris, can you make yourself known? I'll give you a couple seconds to see if you can come back to life. If not, the motion will pass. I believe 1, 2. We have 4 votes to pass the motion anyway. So we can go through with that. So I will take that as a to-do. All right, so we'll move on then. These next 2 are pretty short. They're just updates where I wanted to inform the board of things that have happened on some business that we had to do. You might recall a meeting or 2 ago, there was one Ted Nelson, who I do see in the attendee list. He's the owner of 190 High Street. He's been working on a preservation restriction literally for years. This was the one where, Joe, you'll remember this. You had some concerns about some pre-approved things. You might remember a discussion of a swimming pool in the rear and the gardens and all that stuff, right? Yeah, I see you nodding. Well, the inside dope is that I went back, and it turns out that the NHC, an earlier edition of the NHC, almost all or many different people had approved a draft of his preservation restriction, which had a fairly similar pre-approvals. That really the gist of it was that the back of the house, both the planning board and the NHC were okay with allowing certain changes to be made on the rear of the house. So the preservation restriction has been updated, I guess, to clarify exactly what is or isn't approved. But basically, what I had to do is make it conform to what had been already approved by the NHC, but also add some additional clarity. There are no new pre-approved things, so there wasn't anything in the original PR about the garden, so that was taken out, or the swimming pool that wasn't in the original one. And I added a little bit of verbiage to better define the word modifications, so that it was understood that a modification could be, for example, changing the location of a window or a door, or the type of window or whatever on that one rear facade, but did not include something as major as a roof line change or an actual addition. So that has been discussed also with the Mass Historic Commission. I did this in communication with them, and they are good with that change. They consider it, fairly minor. They were fine with it, so they're okay with it. So it can now go to the mayor and city council for them to approve. And that final version that is posted under this item on the agenda. I think it's like version 10, kind of an indication of how long this has been going on. Now I see, Mr. Nelson, you're not required to say anything. I think, we're good here, but I see they've unmuted you. Did you have anything you wanted to say, or are you good?
I did not, no.
Okay. All right. So that's just an update for the commission on that. Wanted to keep you all informed as to where that was. And Andy, so that final version, I believe it's V10, that can go forward. It has pre-approval from the Mass Historical Commission and can go to the council and city and mayor for their approval.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. The Customs House PR is almost the same there, only I was not involved in making the final changes to that. The people from and I see Greg Colling is on the call. Mr. Can you, I see, okay, so talking is permitted, but you might be muted locally, Greg. Mr. Colling, did you want to say anything about that? As I understand it, I looked over the changes. There were a lot of them, but they were mainly due to having to restate things to make Mass Historical happy with the way the PR incorporated prior PRs and all that. I didn't see anything that differed in intent or in substance with what this board already approved. But I'll give you a chance to talk to that if you'd like to comment.
Well, that's correct. There was just legal language and recitals, minor changes to the recitals, and then restatements about the prior restrictions. And early in the process, the MHC had also requested more description of the architecture, and specifically the interiors.
Right.
So that language was all included, and there were additional photographs that were added early on in the process.
Right.
So I think we're good to go, and we're anxious to get this finished and get. There has been a significant amount of CPC money that's been held up.
Right.
Because of this
yeah,
process.
I should have. I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you. Were you done?
So we'd like to expedite this if possible. It's before the city. I think Doug Muir there's a city council meeting tonight also, I believe. And they're reviewing this as well.
Yeah, I think they did already. I saw some emails on that. I'm sure Andy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe.
Yeah, they took care of that this evening.
Yep. So has the council approved it, Andy?
Well, they have a multiple step process. These are
Okay.
complicated or lengthy procedures. So what they did in committee was recommend to the full council, which the full council then still needs to take a vote on Monday.
Okay.
Oh,
All
good.
right. Yeah, so it is in motion, Greg. So again, just for the benefit of my compatriots on the board that may or may not be as familiar as I am with the details of this, this is a PR that is required in order to release some community preservation funds, which the Custom House Museum is sorely in want and need of, to continue with the many things they've been doing to maintain the building and to ensure the collection inside the building is properly protected from excessive moisture, air conditioning concerns, all of those things. And as Mr. Culling pointed out, they did add photograph and descriptions of some of the things, such as the groin vaults and the I forget what they call
Hanging
it.
stair.
Hanging stair, yes. That stairway, which is unusual and particularly characteristic. So those things are all well protected. I thought that you guys all did a good job. I'm glad the Mass Historic has approved it. And so that's, again, just an update for this board that has been finalized and is on its way to approval.
And we appreciate the review and support of the NHC. Thank you.
I'll just quickly check in. That final report was available to you guys to review. I'm not seeing any. I'll just give a quick second. If anyone has any concerns or questions about it, raise your hand or something. I don't see any. So, but I'm not really expecting any either. It was pretty much as Mr. Colling described. No really material changes from what we had already approved. All righty. So that's this demo delay procedures discussion. That was something that Patricia, you had asked for. Andy is now with us. We don't want to forget, there was, let's see if Ms. Nikesh is still with us, and she is. So she had a question about this, somehow related. But why don't I start with you, Patricia? What was, can you kind of summarize what you wanted to try to seek clarification on?
I was just proposing two things. One was to have two separate votes, one on historically significant and later on preferably preserved. And I also wanted to talk about, demo delay procedures and this importance of getting these structural engineering reports. So I have a bunch of stuff to say, but we can certainly ask Ms. Nikesh the point that she was making about the procedures on the Water Street house first.
Okay, yeah. And looks like talking is permitted, Stephanie. So yeah, so just unmute yourself locally and we should be able to hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. So my concern on your earlier vote was I only heard a vote on historical significance. I think maybe you guys didn't vote on preferably preserved. And I think both votes are needed before you can get to the review of the demolition plan. And I don't know if that will hang you up on this. There is an attorney involved in this one. So Director Port can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think tonight you can go back and add the vote on preferably preserved so that procedurally your imposition of the demolition delay is correct.
This is 265 Water Street?
Yes.
Yeah, in my notes I have we did, and this is actually very relevant to Ms. Pecknick's question. We did usually we do one vote and we decided whether it's, and the outcome could be one of three things: not historically significant but not preferably preserved, or historically significant and preferably preserved. So tonight we separated that into two things. The first vote, you're correct about the first vote. It was just whether it's historically significant, and that was voted yes. And then, but there was discussion, and I remember opening it to public comment, but there wasn't any on whether it be preferably preserved. And I have my notes here on the roll call on that was passed, that it be preferably preserved.
Glenn, Gretchen Joy has her hand up. She may have the answer.
There were
Okay.
2 votes.
Yeah. So it was pretty much as I just described, Gretchen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a second vote on preferably preserved.
Yes,
Okay,
there was.
sorry, I don't know how I missed it. I take it too, but I just wanted to make sure. Thank you very much.
You must have slipped out to go to the refreshment stand.
No, I actually
I'm just kidding.
I didn't move a muscle.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This is Andy Port. If I could just, for the record, I agree, as I understand it, I apologize I'm not here because I had another meeting for the early discussion, but I agree with, I think, what Stephanie has put forward, which is that it's important to, in order to have some sort of ability to look further at it and the plan review and so forth, you do have to determine it's preferably preserved.
Yes, absolutely. And we did do that. We definitely did that. Well, I think part of the confusion stemmed from, you remember when, there's this notion of step 1, step 2, and they used to be in separate meetings, mainly because step 2 required a public hearing. So that required notification of up to abutters, prior notice in the newspaper, et cetera, for that hearing, which took place if and only if it was significant and preferably preserved. If the vote at the first meeting was that didn't result in that decision being made, then there wouldn't be any step 2. So we started condensing those into one meeting so what the planning board does is they notify the abutters and the applicants and everyone who is concerned, like, for example, members of the Preservation Trust, that there is at least a potential of a public hearing on a demolition plan for a given thing, such as the Water Street one, so that it is properly noticed, so we can have a legally held public hearing, which is, quote, step 2, but if and only if it's voted to be historically significant and preferably preserved. So there's always at least 2 votes. If we separate the significance vote from the preferably preserved vote, that would make 3 votes. The first one being, is it significant? Second one being, is it preferably preserved? The third one being the approval or disapproval of the demo plan. So I'm personally fine with having 1 vote on it being historically significant and preferably preserved or not, as long as, but I think that the rub has been people haven't always been clear on what all the implications of that, because if a vote is made that it's historically significant and not preferably preserved, that's the end of our oversight. And there's no further discussion of plans. There's any control over any either demolition or reconstruction. And I think there was some concern about that be fully understood. I know, when some new members, whenever a new member comes on board, this is always a point of confusion as to how that all works.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's only a point of confusion. I think it can be problematic. Yes, it used to be 1 meeting about historically significant and 1 meeting about preferably preserved, but I think that folding them into a single meeting doesn't necessarily mean that the motions have to be simultaneous. So Mr. Morgan had suggested separating the 2 votes because we wanted to look at the plan and think about the plan before we voted on preferably preserved. And so I called other historic commissions around the state and found out, yes, everyone separates it that way. You have a discussion of historically significant, and then you have the applicant's presentation, and then you have a discussion about whether it's preferably preserved. And sometimes people in the public know something that we don't know about preferably preserved. They might know the house history. They might now know how old the house. I mean, this is from my experience being in front of the historical commission as a homeowner, when an abutter next to me wanted to raise the roof three stories. And we went in front of the historical commission 15 years ago, and the historical commission didn't know the history of that house, but people on the street did. They knew there had been a barn there. They knew people had lived there 60 years. They knew it was built by a carpenter. And after people on my street presented that information, then, you know, the chair of the historical commission said, oh, okay, now we realize that it's preferably preserved in the context of the other houses in the neighborhood. So I want to make sure that we have a full and fair discussion of preferably preserved. And I don't know if Mr. Morgan has reasons that are different from mine, but it was initially his suggestion. Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would argue that there may be reasons in the opposite direction also, is that, you know, the definition of a historical building is, in its simplest form, is a building that is at least 75 years old, but that doesn't really say anything about what makes it historically significant in terms of anything that has actually occurred there in terms of a historical event or a historical occupant who has lived there, or historical detail or historical structure. You know, I just don't think the two terms are synonymous. You know, just because something is historically or is defined as historical, it doesn't necessarily merit to be preferably preserved. I mean, I don't know how the procedures support that. Presumably procedures can be tweaked in order to, you know, in order to support conversation and deliberation on the issues. So I do think that there's a reason, and I actually read in the ordinance. I read that is the intent of the ordinance, is to provide discussion amongst the commissioners prior to determining, making a determination about preferably preserved status.
Right. And it says, the ordinance says, you know, not preferably preserved means it shouldn't be considered for preservation, right? It doesn't mean it shouldn't, you know, it should be considered, but the applicant doesn't really want to spend the money. It means, right, it means the same, it has the same consequences saying not historically significant. So preferably preserved means that losing the building would be detrimental to the architectural history of the town. But quickly, my main point though, and Joe was talking about this earlier, is that structural engineering reports are really essential to our assessment of whether something that we think is preferably preserved can actually be preserved. I think Mr. Morgan shares my concern about our commission's practice of accepting at face value these structural engineering reports from applicants. So the reason our demo delay ordinance allows for a city selected applicant paid second opinion is that the drafters of the ordinance understood the hazard of city boards just saying, let's take your word for it, but we've never once insisted on it before. And I think it should be a more routine practice, either when applicants are claiming demolition is necessary because we can't save this building, or when applicants are proposing to demo the roof and the interior walls and then create structural risks. So I'm looking at the difference between the conversations that we had on 2123 Walnut Street, where for 885 square feet of demo, we really talked about the credentials of that engineer. We didn't even want to take Steve Dodge's word for it, even though he's a contractor and he was on the commission. And we reminded the ZBA that, you know, maybe you need a structural engineering report from someone independent who's experienced in this, looking at these structures. I mean, we didn't recommend that they get one. We just sort of reminded them. I feel that we should be insisting. Then on 123 State Street, it was 1,226 square feet of demo. And we just accepted at face value the structural engineer's report, even though it was written by the architect who was doing the construction of the addition. So if I were on 2123 Walnut, and then I listened in on the 123 state call, I would kind of wonder what the heck the difference is, you know? And same thing on 490 Merrimack, where it's just sort of, oh, okay, well, somebody said they want to demo it. So I like when Joe said kick the can down the road, because that's exactly how I'm thinking of it. I think there's no reason we shouldn't be able to certify to the city that a house won't be a total loss. We're not looking for a quote awesome product. We're looking to preserve the houses. And what triggers our objections to the roof demo isn't 12 Harrison, it's the DCOD ordinance. Because our laws protect the roof, they protect the shape and form, the framing, the exterior walls. In an historic timber framed house, the framing is the most historic element. You know, the posts, the beams. So, you know, only an independent structural engineer's report, only with that do I think we will have done due diligence before saying, okay, go ahead and do the demo. And I don't think every structural engineer has that kind of expertise. And finally, I would suggest that in our advisory reports, we also have an educational mission to the ZBA to make clear what laws we're referencing and what is protected by our ordinances. And, you know, times have changed. We have new ordinances. And I think as we have a more detailed understanding ourselves, it is incumbent on us to kind of pass that along. And I'll just close by saying that a very important idea in preservation philosophy, as it's expressed by the National Park Service, is, quote, not all historic buildings can be enlarged in a manner that is consistent with the standards, rather for reasons of size, siting, or location in a district. So you know, the preferably preserved thing maybe is a discussion for another time, but I just want to echo what Mr. Morgan said in your discussion of 3 Hancock, that I think it's our duty. I think we're not doing our job to just say, okay, hope it works out. We're only in charge of how the windows look. You know, it's the whole framing of the house. Can the houses withstand this kind of work? So thanks. That's my thoughts for the night on that.
Okay, and by the way, I managed to boot myself out of the meeting and then rejoined shortly thereafter. So, but I know I was talking to no one apparently, so I don't know what the last thing of my pearls of wisdom you heard or not. But I get the gist. I think both what I'm hearing from both of you, by both of you meaning Joe and Patricia, is that by having the one vote, the way we've typically been doing it, makes it a little bit too easy to possibly not have enough of a deliberative look at what all the implications are before making that decision. I think I see it more coming up more in a case where we might be thinking of saying that a structure is historically significant but not perfectly preserved, you know, because typically the reason for doing that is, you know, it's a wreck, quote, you know, or it's something. There's one I remember, and you know, it was out down Jefferson Street or something. It was just, it had so many changes and additions and everything over many years that to look at the house, you would never in a million years think that it was an old house. Whatever remained of the old house was gone. So, you know, it was old enough, it was over 75 years old, according to the records, technically, to be, quote, significant, but there was nothing, you know, there was nothing there of antiquity to be saved at that point. So those are the, you know, so it's pretty, that middle ground of significant but not perfectly preserved, we don't usually reach that. That's not an outcome we get very often, but sometimes.
I'm triggered by the fact that outcome was reached so quickly on a recent matter for which I was not present. That's
I'm thinking, and the Walnut Street's a good example of where, and often when an applicant is represented by counsel, as with that case and with the one today on Water Street, the counsel, you know, they'll sort of make their suggestion as to what they're looking for from the board. And I think that I'm even thinking that if they come into the planning board and, meet with Caitlin or Jennifer or even Diane and about what they want to do. And if they're thinking that, hey, we're going to, we're looking to look for the NHC to give us the okay to, for that this house isn't worth saving, that they be told right up front that they're going to need an independent structural engineering report to back up that claim. And I think we're within our rights to insist on one.
Yeah.
That sounds like what you guys are kind of arguing for.
I'm just letting you know you'll be hearing it more from me at least. And Mr. Morgan, did you want to jump in because your hand is still up?
Oh, is it? Sorry.
Okay.
No, I don't think I have anything more to say. I do agree that there's probably limited cases where we would determine a historic structure would not be preferably preserved, but I think that I don't think it changes our procedure that much to take the vote after we've invited the audience to talk about it, and we have made our own comments about what is proposed for that, the alterations proposed for that structure. I don't think it changes anything for us, does it, Glenn?
No.
Procedurally, I mean.
Only in that that decision does not require a quote public hearing, so it's not required that we invite public comment. But the chair has the discretion to do so. So that's, and I do that fairly often because the general guidance from the open meeting people and all that is that if it's not going to be a problem and you can conveniently do so, that hearing from the members of the public is preferable. So I'm usually pretty, in other words, there's got to be a good reason not to do it, to not do it. And which I haven't run into yet, to be honest. So the only change to the procedure, Joe, would be to, I would just put in, we would have that step that we would have some discussion and public hearing, not public hearing, public comment before taking the vote on whether it's preferably preserved or not, which, not a big deal. We did that tonight.
Right. Okay. So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Hey, Andy, are you still there paying attention?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Go ahead.
Okay. I want your opinion on something. What if pursuant to what I just said, if an applicant comes in and we see right away they're dealing with a structure that's old, let's say 75 years or older, right? So technically it's historically significant, almost by definition, and they're going to be asking for the NHC to find that it's not preferably preserved, that they be told right then and there by the planning board. Is it legit to tell them right then and there that they're going to need some kind of independent engineering report to back up that claim that there's no salvageable value or whatever this expression is, or do they need to come before the board first and we have to tell them that?
You mean the board? When you say the board, you mean the planning board at that point?
No, I mean this historical commission, that board.
Historical commission. Okay. So yeah, I definitely think, I think in generally speaking, it's always good to get a third opinion. And I think it makes sense to call that out at the earliest possible point, that a third party, unbiased, peer review, if you will, should be required or is being required.
Yeah, I'm just thinking to kind of short circuit the case where, the applicant gets all disgruntled because they came in and now we're telling them they got to go get an independent report and come back later, just because I know that everybody hates the unnecessary delays, that's all.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is something we deal with on a regular basis, and the staff actually end up feeling more of those questions and complaints than I think the boards or the public are aware. It is the process, and so we try to make those things efficient by recommending reviews or getting things expedited. But it's part of the nature of permitting is that there's weeks in between meetings, and getting reports and things and documents revised and things like that.
Okay, so Joe and Patricia, but particularly Joe, to your, the concern you've raised, I will have a discussion, in writing with the planning board and Andy and all that about kind of formalizing that aspect of things. So if, let's say, Jennifer, when she's reviewing an application and she sees that it's 75 or more years old and it looks like they're going to be seeking a finding of not properly preserved, that they be told, right off the bat, that they're going to need an independent engineering report. So, we have that, and B, they're not unnecessarily delayed if that can be avoided.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. That's great.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
In fact, we should probably put in there the engineering firm should be one that has experience in timber framing.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I'm making a note of that. Okay. Anything else on this subject of procedure that anyone wanted to mention?
Well, this is Andy. If I could mention one thing that just came to mind based on the discussion. The ordinances that, and I think about the demolition delay ordinance, but I also, and then some changes have been done to it in recent years, but also the downtown overlay district and the demolition control district. We've talked a little bit before about making sure that the consultants that we have, whether it's this commission or the planning board or ZBA, are truly third-party sort of unbiased reviews, right? And we've had some discussion with counselors, with the Preservation Trust, with Historic Commission members about it, but it might be beneficial. We have sort of a running list, if you will, of suggestions for consultants to be used for doing these peer reviews, but it might be beneficial for the Historic Commission to issue and perhaps update on a regular basis for our office and the board's consideration, where needed, we have that available. A listing of consultants that the commission here thinks is appropriate for doing those peer reviews when that issue comes up, so that list is ready to go. Because the way the ordinances are set up in some cases, for instance, I noticed this with the Harrison Street issue that was taken up relatively recently. The ordinance actually, and I talked to Councilor Eigenman because I think that we should take this provision out and amend it, is it says that the board needs to engage a consultant within 7 days, as I recall, from the initiation of the public hearing. And I don't think that's actually in the city's best interest to have to tie the board's hands in getting a review at a later date if it decides during the hearing process. So I guess it just, by my way of thinking, if the commission here, just to sort of expedite things when those issues arise and time becomes of the essence, it's similar to sort of the constructive approval issue, but not quite as severe. I just think it would be good for us to have an official list that the commission has recommended for those reviews to accompany or to, be the most recent version compared to these sort of running list of suggestions from multiple places. If the commission has a list, that would be helpful to us because we can immediately reach out to those consultants, engage them in short order, and know that the commission here is comfortable with those consultants. So.
Yes, we'll get a list together. Yes.
And it sounded like you said the planning department has a list, or you don't have a list right now?
What we have is a compilation of suggestions that have been given to us, but I just think it might be beneficial, whether it sort of supplants that or supplements that. It might be beneficial, I think, for us to have, and maybe something the commission looks at on a regular basis, just periodically updating a list of consultants you believe to be expert in, the fields required, and it's come up in other permitting processes I've seen in my tenure here, but I think it's generally beneficial to have consultants that are outside the city. I've seen in some instances where they're, too close inside the community to be truly unbiased. So.
Okay. Yep. All right. So it sounds like you'd like us to review your list and also see what others we might find that we can feel are trusted. Yeah, good idea. Sure. Give us more work to do.
There's a hand up in the attendees.
There is.
Yes.
Oh, it appears to be a member of the Preservation Trust. Well, we've allowed her to speak before. I guess it won't hurt us to allow it one more time. Ms. Nikitish, did you have something you urgently wanted to convey to us?
Well, urgent probably isn't the right word. I can also just write to you guys tomorrow morning, but it has to do with the discussion about independent structural engineers.
Right.
Especially with Director Port on the line, I just wanted to mention that the wording under the demolition delay ordinance is very different from the wording under the DOD and the DCOG. Those ordinances are very specific that it is an independent structural engineer hired by the city, but paid for by the applicant. And this has come up under demolition delay in the past. Demolition delay isn't written that way. It is written that the applicant may be required by the commission to submit a structural report on the structure's soundness that is prepared by a licensed professional structural engineer. So the applicant, the applicant gets to choose the engineer. The types of excellent criteria you want to put on that engineer are not in the ordinance. So I'm not sure if you get pushback in some of those cases. But
oh, sorry.
I know that on Walnut Street, for example, the attorney did submit a structural engineer's report, a structural engineer that they had paid, that you can't really say was biased and unbiased and independent. So I think Director Port, I don't know if the language needs to be changed in demo delay. Just a warning, when that was attempted in 2013, it failed miserably. So,
when you mean a change to the code, is that what you're saying?
Yes, so there was there was an attempt to make some changes to demolition delay, and one of them, based on the then Chair Linda Smiley's request, was that the structural engineer would be paid for by the applicant, but would be selected by the city.
Yeah, understood. And I don't disagree with that, what you've just put forward as far as the distinction between the ordinances. I know that there's been a good effort in recent years to update some of the ordinances. I do think it would make sense to update the ordinance to parallel the Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, 53G language that is encompassed elsewhere in the zoning ordinance, for instance, for the DCOD and the DOD, to basically ensure that the Historic Commission can also call upon a third-party peer review consultants at the applicant's expense, but consultants that are chosen based on qualifications by the city.
That would be excellent if that could happen. And just the second thing is that one of the things the process under demolition delay of separating historical significance from the rest of it in separate meetings was it gave the commission time to do a site visit.
Yeah, exactly. I saw that from the previous minutes of meetings. Yes, it would say historically significant site visits is set up for this time and this date, and then by the time people came back to talk about preferably preserved,
yes,
they've been there. And I must say, when I read demo delay and we are empowered to impose conditions, I take it that one of the conditions can be the independent structural engineering report. That's how I've always read it anyway. So maybe I was misreading it, but I thought that's a valid condition. So
yeah, I don't know, it might be. I'm just saying that it is differently written, and it's come up before.
Okay.
And site visits are a good thing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. As you've proven once again that it's worthwhile permitting you to
call on the public, yes.
Right, to contribute to our proceedings here. Your lengthy institutional knowledge, put it that way, is often quite helpful. So thank you for your comments. If there's nothing else on that process, there was the item on the agenda about, the CPC thing. I don't know that much about it. And I know Caitlin, was trying to fill us in a little bit. As I understand it, on the Community Preservation Committee votes on, reviews applications for CPC grant money and votes on which ones it wants to recommend to the city council for approval. That's what the CPC does. And there are seats on that committee reserved for members of the, well, there's a seat reserved for a member of the Newburyport Historical Commission, as well as other city boards. So it doesn't have to be the chair, thankfully. We will, I'm not going to ask someone to step forward tonight necessarily, but Ron Ziemba was our representative on the CPC. So someone else will have to step into that position. So I would hope that you will all give that some thought. And we're told that it's not is nowhere near the time commitment that being in on the NHC board is. They meet, I think she said something like 7 times a year. Like I said, the hope, what they do is they get together. They probably, before they get together, they take a look at the grant applications and basically just discuss them and vote on which ones they want to put forward. So I think it is a good that someone from the Historical Commission be on there. So anyway, please do consider that. Andy or Caitlin, if you're still there, anything you want to add to what I just said about the CPC spot?
The only thing I guess I would ask if the sooner we're able to fill that position, the better, just because as we go into the end of January into February, looking at a new round of applications, I should say it'll take a little bit longer for the committee to start looking at the applications, but to at least have someone in place who can look at the next grant cycle and weigh in on all the CPC applications, but obviously in particular the historic preservation.
Okay. Yeah. So when does their cycle, when will they typically start reviewing those, Andy?
So they start getting applications in February, and that extends to the spring or the early spring with a couple of meetings to review them. They make a recommendation to the city council. Again, this is the usual yearly timeframe. The city council late spring to summer timeframe typically appropriates or doesn't, depending on the recommendations of the committee, funds for projects or and so forth. And then the funds become available after the council's appropriation for the project. So it's basically, as you pointed out, there's not a heavy demand for meetings on that end of things. It's actually one of the easier committees to be on, I think, and it's more fun because you're actually providing positive funds to a project. But they generally speaking, it's kind of February to April maybe. That's a couple of important meetings. The rest of the year there's periodic updates, but they're not the key ones where they're crucial that you be there per se.
Okay, so you're saying that police protection isn't required if you vote against a particular application?
Yeah, it's not like the other boards.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Andy, for that, and hopefully we'll get someone in on that by then. I did it's been advertised that this commission is a member shy, actually 3 if you consider that we can have 2 alternate members. I had a guy in mind and I spoke to him the other day, and he said he was honored that I suggested it, but due to his age and other things, he said, I wouldn't want to commit. I wouldn't want to say yes if I couldn't really commit to doing a good job, which I really can't due to other commitments. So he politely turned me down, but he's going to see what he's involved in the local, or has been kind of involved in the local real estate industry. He'll think I said, if you can think of anyone who would be good, let them know. He's kind of retired at this point. He's getting on in years. So if you know people who would be good members of this commission, by all means, encourage them to contact the mayor's office. The procedure is they basically submit a letter and a resume to the mayor. She makes the appointments. What the procedure is, well, you guys know this because you all went through it. She puts forward an appointment to the city council, and they review and approve it. All right, so we won't want to get out of here at a reasonable time. Well, it's 10:43. So any reason why we can't move on to approval of the minutes from November 12th?
Let's approve
right.
them. Yeah.
All right, so a motion to approve the minutes from November 12th. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, was that?
that was
Mr.
Peter.
Peter, yeah, okay. Okay, so Mr. Comworth is absent. Mr. Fay, is he still absent?
Yeah, he's smart. He has to teach in the morning, so he probably is prepared.
Dropped off.
Cool.
All right, Mr. McNamee, your vote on that.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan
Yes.
and Ms. Picnic,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so those pass. And by the way, it wasn't noted in the minutes, Mr. Morgan, but I think you saw, if you looked at the final report I made on that Harrison Street project, I did note your concern about leaving the building in its current state for 3 years, which, as you probably know, if you read this morning's paper, that it's not going to happen at this point either.
Yes, I saw those in the notes. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is that any opposed, or is there a second for that?
I will second that.
Mr. Morgan seconds, okay. Mr. McNamee, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick,
Yes.
okay, and the chair is affirmative as well. So we can officially adjourn legally and all that good stuff. So thank you once again. I didn't quite expect this to go as long as it did, that bit of a protracted discussion on